the sideways.
Just set your laptop
Me on
sideways
it.
like a
Yeah.
duck.
Yes.
Okay, never mind. Never gonna say that joke.
So we're going to try to get another.
Never mind. That joke's
probably
not
best
going
not to.
anywhere.
Everybody look at the minutes before the meeting
Yeah,
starts.
that's great.
They're in
I
front
did
of
that
you.
as soon as you sent it.
Are they
Did you?
changed from what I
I
have?
emailed them a couple hours ago.
Oh, I didn't see
We got
that.
some more
Yeah, they-
bills to pay.
I just
and
had-
we got these.
So we should be able to get
minutes
stuff
from the
moving
previous
around,
meeting.
Oh,
Yeah, either way.
okay.
I like
we
how
were
you,
gonna do it,
Kim, I like how
and
you,
it's like,
you
oh,
summarized.
I don't know who told me.
the comment.
Dave must have told me.
Kim did not?
So.
Oh, that was-
as soon as he
oh,
said
yeah.
I was like,
That was
oh,
Mike.
shoot, we'll
Right,
just
that was
wait
Mike,
for
that's
it
right.
and then shuffle it around.
Right. I like how Mike,
Yeah, I think
Mike and
whatever we've
Hayden
done
are working on it.
tomorrow is try.
Mike and Hayden.
Minute writing.
Well, that's right,
Got 'em
because
trained right
Hayden,
up.
Hayden told me that,
Or
that I was
do
supposed to say, these are the best darn,
Or do you want me to?
the best darn meeting minutes that I've ever read.
Being away all winter.
He saw me at the Y and he was like, hey, it's your meeting tomorrow night.
They're just going to sit on
Shout
the
out.
TV up there.
Why not?
Nobody's going to bother up with headstrums.
They did a fine job.
All right, call this meeting to order.
Yep.
Time is now 6:30. Everyone is present and accounted for. This is when we open the open forum. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the council via the open forum? Seeing that everybody's on the agenda, I would assume no, unless you're dying to. Okay, close the open forum, move on to the consent agenda. For the consent agenda, you have an additional packet of payments that that should be taken a look at, and also the very finely crafted minutes for the meeting from our last meeting, which the new guy in the office, Hayden, did. So, shout out to Hayden. So, if there's anything you'd like to pull for discussion, we can certainly do that. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries. Moving right along, Public Works Facility Project. John isn't here, Mr. Hagenmuller. I went up there last week. Have you guys stopped up in the last week or so?
Had lots of people asking me if for people moving in and where they're all at, and I said, I think they are.
Yeah, we're moving
Moving
in.
in?
They're still doing some work. There's a few things left to do, some electrical, some paint work, but they did go through to the first punch list anyway. That everybody will be working on that stuff now. We've been moving in for a couple weeks, so
What about Bruce's building? It's up on blocks.
it's in process. But I believe the process was held
Delayed.
up a little bit today. So
So will it get out of there before winter?
That's the
I think
plan.
we missed that already. But it should. I don't think winter's going to stop it. I think it's going to go anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, he was saying that it's imminent. Moving is imminent based
Okay.
on the mover. So that's good about that. Does anybody else have any questions about the Public Works facility updates? I'm gonna head up there tomorrow and just check things out again, see how progress is going. But when I saw it last week, it's starting to look pretty darn good. And there's going to be a while where there's a lot of things going in one place, and then it'll be moved to another place, kind of figuring out where everything belongs. But once they get that done, I think we should be pretty happy with it.
Oh, go ahead.
Please, you first.
All right. The outdoor storage, is that going to stay down in the park through the winter, or is that going to get moved up there too?
I doubt
or-
we can move it right now.
Hard to say. I don't think we're in any rush to get out of the park in the wintertime.
Right, that's what.
So, and even in the spring, it's not like there's an imminent use for that space. So we'll probably start on the inside stuff and see how it goes.
If the bonding for the boat launch were passed, then we would have more of an impetus to get that done. But we have quite a few other projects to be working on right now with that new facility and moving everything around and prioritizing that. I don't think it's the best use of our guys' time to get them.
Well, it also seems that, we don't have any control up there for access to the site. And there's control down at the,
Yeah, that's a good point.
down at the existing site.
Not so much control, and
There's a fence.
it's certainly no different than what we have up at the new site. There will be some fence installed. Not sure when at this point. That's not really why we're not moving the outside stuff. I think it's just
Okay.
prioritization on the inside stuff first.
Did you have something?
Well, we kind of sized this to accommodate everything we have currently, and then a little bit of room to grow as I remember it. And so that tells me right now there's maybe a little extra space. And one of the pieces of the puzzle we're trying to figure out with City Hall as what to do with all these lovely books. And I thought, there could be space for books up there maybe. No, you don't think so?
I don't think so.
Well,
I
let's
mean,
get-
one of the problems is that there's not a room that we
Sure.
could give to them.
Right.
And so any room they'd be in would be shared with our uses, and
Be
that's just not a good
pile
mix.
of books in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't really
Pile
want to
of
just
books.
have random 24 volunteers have off hours access to our building. So,
Oh, is that how it works?
I mean, it can, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Sounds like maybe they could take over the office space as of December 31st.
The office outpost.
Outpost. Put
It's
that-
possible.
we could probably do
certainly-
better than that.
I know.
So anyway, there's a lot of stuff going on with that. I also I'll have a friend's.
Is there some water running?
No, that's just the heat.
Heat.
That's just the heat in this building. It's loud.
Yeah.
I'll have a library board update in my personal update, and that'll talk about the Friends and their prioritization of places
Oh,
to
great.
store and sort books. So, any other questions about the Public Works facility?
So at this point, they're still just trying to get themselves organized, figure out how it all fits together, where to put their stuff or whatever.
They've mostly got that
Oh,
divvied
okay.
up.
All right.
So we're figuring out what equipment needs to be purchased, furniture, and then actually just taking all of our things that are in that space and moving them up there.
So they'll start maybe making actual use of it.
Well, they're using it right
Yeah.
now.
Oh, okay.
No, they've
So
already
they're-
got stuff up there.
Well, I mean, actually, not just having their stuff there, but I mean, actually need to work.
Yeah, I think they're using it that way right now, and there's still a lot of their stuff that's in other places, so they'll kind
Sure.
of live in two homes, but this is their home base now.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Cool. Anything else? Great. Well, if you have any questions, let me know. Feel free to stop up to the Public Works facility to check it out. We'll keep planning, and once we get settled in that building, then we'll set a date for an open house. Moving on to the Fire Marshal report. So, gentlemen, please come forward, sit by a microphone. We've done an inspection. We'll get to the right page. Of propane tanks in the city, and that gave us a rating on our safety level, I guess is what it would be, ISO.
Well, that's
No, they're
different.
separate.
Separate?
There's two separate issues. This is Dan Beeson, he's with State Fire Marshal's
Okay,
office.
take it away.
And I guess I contacted Dan because we had an issue that was brought up to me, so then I contacted them, and it's an issue that it's a public safety issue that we need to address. And it's not gonna be a very easy one, so we contacted Dan, and I'll let Dan kind of take it from here. He's
Okay.
My role here is State Fire Marshal's office. We were asked by your chief to come in and assist him with a complaint. He had a formal, well, it was a verbal complaint, it wasn't a written complaint, about placement of your LP tanks throughout the town. And the question, the complaint is that they're too close to buildings that have, mixed occupancies. So I came up and I met with the chief and assistant chief, it was about a month ago. We did a walk around town, and we did identify.
And I, just really quick, so I get on the right track.
Sure.
You're not talking about public ones. You're talking about privately owned, potentially commercial, or
Right,
okay.
right, yeah.
All right.
Well, ours are included in that.
Yeah, actually,
okay.
yours is about a foot.
Everybody's.
Everybody's.
Yeah.
everybody.
This is a general safety of propane tank.
Okay.
Right, the buildings, and I handed you out a propane 101, kind of gives you a little background on what propane tanks, where they can be placed adjacent to buildings, and what kind of protections are required of them. And we did find some that were deficient, meaning they were too close to the building, or they didn't have the proper barrier protection around them. Some of the things, and this works back, and I'm going to back up a little bit here. When a propane tank is too close to a building, propane leaks, it finds a way into the building explodes, block is done. We've seen this numerous times throughout cities in Minnesota where the fires will start, propane leaking or natural gas into the building explodes. So the reason this law was put in place was to move the tanks away from buildings and move them out of alleyways or stuff where they can be hit by cars or leak into the building. So we did find a few that are right next to some buildings. One's next to a restaurant, and I don't know what the other one is. What is allowed is a 125-gallon tank. Most of you guys have probably seen them. They're the smaller little bubble tanks and they're placed. A lot of them are placed perfectly. 125 and under are allowed next to buildings, but when you get into the 500 or the 1,000-gallon tanks, there's clear code written that says they need to be at a minimum 10 feet away from an occupied structure and have the proper protection. The two buildings that we saw, one was I believe it's a 1,000-gallon tank, and the building is built they're building a building currently right next to it. The other one has the tank right up against their back door, and that's a 500-gallon tank. So the options to make these right is, you have a couple different options. One is obviously you move the tank out 10 feet away from the building, allow the proper barriers around it to protect it. Second one would be to put in a smaller tank. Sometimes not very economical, especially with the gas companies. But I noticed that with a lot of the gas companies that do have the small tanks, I mean, they must be up here every day. You guys must see them pretty regular in the town.
They deliver often.
The third option would be to pull it out into the parking lot areas. They're going to lose parking space. But it looked like most of the tanks could be moved away from at least 10 feet away from the building. The code goes back into the 30s when they started addressing this problem. And if you look on the second page or third page, it does give a diagram of how close and what size the tanks can be to the homes, and then also to the exhaust ports or air conditioning units, anything that is spark producing. So Ben asked me to come up. We did a walk around town and looked at a few buildings. We found a few that are non-compliant, that first aid code do need to be moved, and in the best interest of your town need to be moved.
Sure. And one of those was ours.
Was it? Oh, yeah.
Where's that here? Yeah.
I think you're 1 foot too close. I think that's what we measured, wasn't it? Wasn't it
Just
9
off
feet?
on it.
Yeah, city.
The city's tank.
Okay.
I know with fire safety, installation of, wood burning appliances, you can, radiant heat is a danger, and you need to have a clearance from combustible materials.
Sure.
You can sometimes decrease that clearance by adding various layers of protective,
When it comes to, when we're talking about, like wood pellet stoves or things like that,
Yep.
you got to follow the manufacturer's guidelines because they've had to fall into,
Yep.
the
Yeah, they have
mechanical
to be
codes.
rated. But my question is there a way you can put up a barrier so that this is not as much of a danger? Or?
A barrier. Well, no, they're not, they don't give that option. They
Okay.
want the tanks that are the larger ones,
Yeah.
10 feet away. You can have a smaller one close,
Yeah.
but when you're getting into the 500 and the 1,000,
So, but I guess my question is, there's not a way to decrease that minimum distance by installing some kind of barrier?
right, no, not,
Yeah, it's just not a heat impingement issue, it's a leaking issue.
Well, right, that's what I was, because you want it away from a port of entry. So if you can somehow make that obstructed from the tank.
the tank needs to be 10, the code says it pretty simple, it needs to be 10 feet away from
Right.
any,
Yep.
they call it container separation distance, part of the code. They have an interesting word for it. Important buildings is how they refer to it in the building code. Important building, so, yeah, okay. Important
So
building.
the answer is no, you can't do
No, you
that. That's all I was looking for.
and it's going to be an inconvenience, but it's something we can do. Yeah.
What about buried
We're just
tanks?
never calling them anymore.
Okay, buried tanks, they also address that in the code.
Is it, it's, okay, I just don't see
And
it.
I didn't include it with this one. I don't think you can bury, because I asked Ben about this, are you guys gonna put in gas lines or anything? And I don't think you
We're
can
not
really
planning
dig
on it.
real easy here. We were watching the line guys trying to snake a ditch witch under the co-op, and he said it's all rock down there, I can't.
Yeah, that doesn't
so
work.
no. I didn't think it would apply, so I didn't bring any information on it, but it does
There's
state
quite
what's.
a bit of digging available downtown.
Is there?
The real
Yeah.
problem is
Beach rock.
there's a water table before you get a rock,
Right,
so.
so.
you know,
That could be another option though for a solution.
That's what I was thinking, not so much. just
And you
for
you
here.
could, and the code does address it. I didn't pull any data for that. I was just looking.
Is that
at
off
what
the,
we had.
like, fire code or building code, or?
It's a state building code, there's a
Okay.
gas code. The fire code does speak about it, so that's where,
All right, thank you.
Yeah, because we don't enforce the state building code up here, have a building inspection program, where is the enforcement mechanism for this?
when something bad happens.
Before something bad happens?
Yeah, so
Well-
so for instance, these
Okay.
properties that are not,
Good point.
these properties that aren't complying, how do we encourage them to?
Well, it's also the liability of the supply company that's bringing the gas in.
Okay,
They know they're not supposed to be, they know they're not compliant tanks where they're placed and the type they are.
So the follow-through doesn't necessarily come from you to ask for this to be taken care of?
No, I won't
Okay.
be writing orders. I'm here to support your chief.
The concerns, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Is this something that's typically enforced by the local fire department, or?
It is, because he's what we call the AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction. All fire chiefs for their area have that badge on them.
Target? Badge.
Well-
You can call it whatever, yes.
You know,
Some days it changes.
I know it's gonna be inconvenient, but if you look back at any type of gas explosion and how it affected the town.
You know, some days it changes.
The potential is huge.
I know it.
Chris? There we go.
It is, and this is something that we can fix. It can be fixed relatively easy.
So if somebody has a building that occupies their whole property and has a tank sitting, say, in the alley or adjacent to that building somehow, and they don't really have an option to move that tank away,
what is their option?
Yeah.
There is an option. The option is put in a smaller tank, 125 pounds or under.
Can they do
That's-
125, like linked 125s? No, that's what I thought. It's gotta be just a single.
I mean, you could have
So
them,
the one we have
yeah.
right there, right?
the propane companies know the exact distance that they can stagger tanks, but they can't be a little tank farm is what you're asking.
Yeah.
yeah,
So-
because I've seen some that have had 200-pound cylinders adjacent, and when one empties out, they turn the other one on, and then they
Right, and a
haul the
lot
other
of
one
mobile
away.
homes, right, yeah, and they'll have the diverter valve. Those are only 100-pound tanks,
Right, but,
or 90 or whatever.
but they're allowed to have 200-pound tanks there to do that, or?
We did identify a building over here
Yeah,
that
didn't
had,
one of them have
that
a-
had three,
Sistered up, was that the log building?
yeah.
Yeah. Again,
Yeah.
the gas company that's supplying the fuel to these buildings, they know what the regulations are, and they're supposed to be adhering to them.
So is that something that you can, like, you said you don't do enforcement, you support him. He's the AHA or whatever.
Right, he would write the letter.
So you would write the letter?
I would write the letter.
Okay, so are you gonna be writing a bunch of letters then? From your,
Well, it'll be a stamp letter,
Right.
or
Right.
a form letter that would go out to all the businesses saying, this is what it is, we're gonna be checking if you're not compliant, they need to be moved. And then from there, it goes to, I think one of the things that, it would end up being what the city can regulate with these people that we can hold over their head to make them comply.
So does that letter also then go out to the propane providers? Because it seems
It
like if the
could.
propane providers are sharing liability with it. I mean, I
Right.
don't want the
They-
city to overstep where our or where our jurisdiction is, but it seems like, this comes back to our fire chief. So then that
That's a
might be,
Chris helping you out thing, right? Mr. Hood?
There's many options here if Ben needs support.
Well,
Right. I
so,
mean, we
so I
have-
guess my question, and I really appreciate you bringing this up, but my question is, we're the first to know here? No one else knows? The propane provider should know, or they do know, or
They
you
do
haven't
know.
talked to them?
They should have known already, and I haven't talked to them. I wanted
Yeah.
to get with Dan, and I wanted to get with
Yeah,
all of you,
Yeah.
saying, bringing this problem to the forefront and saying, okay,
yeah,
I'm on the hook for this public safety issue.
yeah.
Therefore, the city is also on the hook for this. Something needs to be changed. So we need to take the steps to pass this liability off to the people that own the tank and the people that service the tank.
So how many are non-compliant?
In the block that we walked around, we found 5,
Okay.
maybe 6, and that was just a short kind of a walk around town.
Yeah, we weren't doing a
Well,
formal
And-
grid.
there's 3 propane providers, and so that makes a total of 8 contacts. And in my mind, it might be a little more monkey business, and it's maybe not as official than a letter, but it might make sense to just talk to them before a letter.
Yeah,
And,
very
you know,
good.
Yeah, that's. you know,
I found
letters
with
can be alarming.
cooperation, it works. I mean, it's an explanation. Let's
Yeah.
point out the basic
Conversation,
things, and a
yeah.
lot of people are gonna, 99% of the people go, you're right, let's start working toward this. And
Well, and some of it might be an easy, there might be an easy
Yeah.
remedy. Others,
Yep.
it might be a really
Big deal.
difficult remedy.
Well, there's definitely a couple in town that are gonna be an issue,
Yeah.
that it's gonna cost it's gonna cost some money to make the changes to make everything compliant.
Well, and some of
But
it's
we
not
have
e-
to remember that they know this when they start out, and if the choice is made to not go that direction,
Well, there's one tank in particular that I could say that the new construction that we found, they were compliant until the building that was built
Not
next.
according to this chart they weren't.
Well,
Oh. I see.
correct. You are correct. They were built right on their it was on their property line,
Right.
yeah.
which was skipped back when they put that there, yes.
does this also, though, I mean, you just sort of, it sounds like a random sampling, so to speak, just let's go take a look around. But that means that maybe a more thorough, I mean, you can't say, I just saw a few and I didn't look everywhere.
Now we're starting to get into a much more interesting conversation.
About enforcement.
Code enforcement. Yeah, we're talking about code enforcement. We do not enforce the building code. We do not have resources dedicated to doing inspections. Ben is a volunteer chief. We pay him a few $100s to be the chief. He's not going to do citywide walk-around inspections. That's not the strategy. More heavily in fire code enforcement. It's going to take more than we've got.
Well, this particular issue right now was brought up as a complaint, and it is a public service, it's a public safety issue. And since it was brought up to me, and then as
To me,
as
to you.
bringing it up to the fire marshal's office, this is something that, at the very, very minimum, to pass off liability off of me and the city, we need to send at least a letter making them aware that they are
Right.
not in compliance with this code, and take the steps to rectify
And
it.
if-
I don't
and
think
this
it's a liability
situation.
transaction, though. We're not talking about passing off liability or even really being concerned about liability. We're talking about public safety. That's what you said at first, and that's what this issue is for us. So, and when they did their inspection, they did what I would characterize as a strategic inspection. They picked an area of the town where it was densely developed with a lot of property value and a lot of activity and likely difficulties with the location of propane tanks. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have to take the next 3 circles out from that and go and poke around in people's backyards and start measuring building the tank when we don't do that for any other public safety issue. But since this one we've already started with, simple enough to just get in contact with these folks, raise some awareness around the community, get the attention of the propane companies,
Yes.
and see what happens.
Well, I
very-
find this a huge
I think that's a
safety issue
strategy.
in a small community, and as someone in business who's had that knowing what could have happened to this community, I think it makes me stop pretty fast and think.
Right.
Because it could adversely affect many other property
Oh, yeah.
in this community
And-
pretty
and
fast.
That's why I
It's
initially,
worth it.
why I initially suggested that you also send those letters to the propane companies as an invitation to, to begin educating the public and also their drivers who fill the tanks so that they can help continue this process. Because, like Mike said, this is not something for our fire department to invest a lot of their time and energy in. I mean, from the other part of this conversation, the ISO rating, we have other things that we can invest our time and energy into that will help the community better to help improve public safety, because they're the ones who see these tanks all the time. They're the ones that fill them. They can help move the tanks and actually make those things safer. So I fully support you in writing letters to the people that we've found to be in non-compliance, and then also to the propane companies to encourage them to help to do, because it is a public health situation, and it's one that if any of these tanks, if something adverse happens to these tanks, then it's going to impact a ton of different stuff. I just
Clearly, they're not partners now. So maybe by bringing this to get a little more active
Well,
about
and it is on them to be educating their drivers and their people
Yeah.
to not be
They
filling
know.
suspect tanks, and they
They
should
know.
know. And it's interestingly enough, the first time that I met Dan, we were in the parking lot, and someone was actually filling the tank that started this whole conversation while we were there.
Was the target of the complaint.
Were they sweating?
The guy, I'm pretty sure the driver had absolutely no idea
No,
what
yeah.
he
Which I think is Marshal, and
A lot of
I know.
times the insurance.
People-
That's the sort of
people-
information that's going to.
The ability, if they're filling tanks
Correct.
that are,
exactly.
in violation of a
Recent ones that I was going to show you a video of a building situation, and it was a licensed propane company that it was replacing a tank that was too close to the building. The tech didn't quite understand how to transfer from the old tank to the new tank. Caused a huge leak into a store, and thus the store blew up and killed 4 people. So I mean, we have to go and we hope that the propane companies know what they're doing, but obviously, if they're filling these tanks, they
Well, the
might
delivery
be
drivers
miscommunicating.
may not know that, but
They're
somebody in that company should be aware of what the rules and regulations are regarding
Sure.
placement of tanks, and of course, maybe some of these have been there for a long time.
Well,
maybe
there
others-
was,
others
well,
are- others
obviously
are
the
relative.
the 1,000-gallon, that tank has probably been there for 30, 40 years.
And there's no label on it or anything. was
No,
it?
that one's been there for quite a while. And one of the other ones that we found, the tank obviously had been placed there for a long time, but the building had been added onto,
Oh, interesting.
which brought it out of
Brought it out
compliance.
to the tank.
Which brought it out closer to the tank, so that made it not in compliance. So since we don't enforce building codes, and we don't have an inspector, and we're relying on contractors, other folks to be knowing these things, this discussion's out there too, as far as when somebody brings a building plan or something.
Year. I mean, if I understand correctly, when I ran would come and inspect the tank every year, and that for compliance state of the tank itself. I do think that a lot of the onus of this rests on the propane companies, and even potentially for enforcement, it could even come down to of the responsibility that other organizations have.
I think that should be addressed.
Right.
But beyond that, I think, if necessary, to get those tanks moved or something done to bring them into compliance.
Right. Yes, that's.
I mean, I don't think
those
we-
are the steps that we need to take initially here to try to mitigate this. I mean, I don't know. down the line, if, I mean, if steps aren't taken, what, out, some way to make this, figure out some way of enforcement. Because we can only go so far as it is now. It's-
I can go and I can come to John's building and say I'm here on a formal complaint after the, you know, it's pretty easy for me to explain this to people, and time they'll agree and they'll take it. What would happen for me is I would write orders against a building.
Okay.
So John's building, then I would write a formal, go to the city or county attorney, say I'm not getting compliance with these people, and then it gets in, you know, we go on from there. Long and hard process, which in some cases we have to do. But again, generally just through cooperation, the fire chief making a telephone call to the local gas companies and saying, you need to get the cooperation from the people that you're filling these non-compliant tanks with. You know which tanks you're doing that are not.
And these rules or regulations, I mean, you're saying that they should know, but is
That's
there a
a license.
requirement that they should know, or is there some
Yeah.
training that they have to go to that
I can't answer exactly
Anyone that
what training they would go
dispenses,
under.
anyone that dispenses propane has to go to a propane handler's class and like have a certificate for it. 'Cause one of my buddies was one of the drivers for one of the companies up here, and that was one of the qualifications that he needed, is he needed to get his commercial driver. Don't get compliance within a certain amount of time, then we can call Dan and we can have him, you know, just remind these people that this. So if, unless you guys are probably at a point where we can move forward with that strategy.
Yeah, the only other thing on our permit applications that asks the question about location of any tanks, so that somebody would have to provide that information, that, so we'd at least have some knowledge.
Seems reasonable, especially considering that we don't have any ground.
So
So
that
the-
implies that someone here.
This has been what it is since the 30s.
Yeah, 1930. It's if you just Google LP tanks and NFPA, you can, if you belong to the website, you can get in there and you can see all the commentary and all the history behind it. But as far as the State Fire Marshal's office goes, these are what the setbacks need to be for tanks, and that's what we stand
And
by.
maybe they have to have a sign off from the propane company that says that they
Exactly.
meet the standards.
If they're, if we're kind of saying right now that they're the ones that really should know and have responsibility for the time this happens and ongoing when they deliver, so maybe it's their initial sign off to say, at least initially, at the time we did this. One thing I do think would be helpful is communications, that Dan would help you with those communications. You have all the right material, you've probably written and communicated this a zillion million times to people. Any help you could give Ben would be wonderful, so this gets communicated accurately and concisely.
That would be citing the code, but I think the issue here is the complaint was driven at one specific spot, and that's what put us there. Then from that spot, we spread out and found other things. That's why we talked about, well, what is the solution? Let's talk to the city council, get the city to.
conversation with the property owner?
No.
Okay, because
No.
or with a letter, if
In
you want to hand
conjunction with-
deliver.
That's
pretty cool.
Right.
Yeah, we don't want to know.
And obviously, I know most of everything the establishment ever again, or I may just wander around a little bit more just to see what we've got, and then,
Yeah,
you
and
know, hand deliver, you know, this sheet with a, you know, saying this is what we need to do.
your time is, I would, focus on, and this is just me speaking, and then goes, because it's going to be a process to get everyone on board.
Oh, absolutely.
But,
Well, and I know you're saying this in jest, but remember, what you're doing is something totally objective that needs to be done.
Right.
It's not a personal thing, and you shouldn't even have to, in the back of your head, view it about someone's reaction, because you're not out there doing anything more
Just
than
like
what
you
needs to be done.
Yeah, it's the same. Cool, so we'll move forward in that direction? Sound good? Because you still have one more thing you want to talk
Yeah,
about.
I've got, if you've got any questions on this, I mean, we can touch on this ISO fairly quickly. I mean, I just got this packet, so I've got to peruse it while we were discussing other matters before the meeting here.
Yeah, I didn't put it in the packet with the idea that Ben was gonna summarize it or give a report on it. It's just for information, so.
And it was just this ISO report, which is the insurance safety something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically there was no change in our classification from the last time they did a survey up here. I did make a phone call this afternoon because they kind of changed it was like reading Chinese, and even before this it was like reading Chinese. They don't really have a good way unless you talk to them. So I did talk to them, and basically there was no change. And like I say, I just got the packet, so I haven't got to do a heck of a lot of research. But she did say that one of the deficiencies was for whatever reason, was our dispatching center being integrated, a countywide dispatching center. Which, I mean, they're looking at the city of Minneapolis and great big cities right down to towns of 50 people. So, and what they look at is like the NFPA and National Fire Standards and their recommendations. So, and from what she said is the NFPA and the fire service doesn't like having integrated paging or, dispatch centers. Like Minneapolis and New York and all of these big cities, I mean, they page the fire department, they talk to the fire department, and then they interact with each other after the fact. So that was one thing, and I think that maybe dispatch has updated some of their stuff, so the next time this comes around, that might be something that bumps our rating up. She did say that we're really on the bubble of going to the next step. Some of the other things that we kind of were lacking in was kind of administrative, kind of record keeping stuff on trainings and stuff like that we hadn't been keeping up on, so we've instituted better policies of record keeping and training and stuff like that. So I guess I'm going to be coming here quarterly or after our chiefs meetings. We had discussed before, so
It's good to know what's going on.
So I'll be trying to come here a little more often and give you updates as to what's going on. And I'm going to peruse this and see what, if anything, there's that we can look at to maybe, if it's worthwhile for us doing something a little different or doing stuff different to maybe change this rating, because it could possibly affect everybody, because it is an insurance thing and insurance companies look at it, don't look at it, whatever. So that's another thing that we've just been working on.
Cool.
Whatnot, so.
And
Yeah,
if you want to see a copy of that, then we can get a copy for.
I think Mike's got a copy. Kim said that somebody can turn this into an email, right? If you want to read this, it was fairly boring from what I was reading.
Insurance.
Thanks for that.
Quick one for the team.
Good summary. Good summary. It's pretty boring.
So, and I guess, I don't know, I haven't been here for a while. I don't know if you've got any questions for me or anything like that. In the last week, we've had 2 fire calls. Knock on wood, we don't get 3 here pretty soon. Everything comes in 3s.
We do.
First responders are still busy. They had 2 calls today, and they've been running about a call every couple of days, it seems like.
Wow.
I guess the snowbirds have been sticking around longer than it seems like they have, or whatever. I guess we're looking possibly this spring, after those buildings are moved, to the old Tom DeBoda property, at demolition or possibly burning, doing some trainings and stuff like that. So.
Oh, train away, please.
Cool. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, thanks for coming in, Dan. Nice to meet
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. All right, next thing on the agenda, we've got a park revenues update. We've got Dave sitting in the back there waiting for his turn. So you guys all know the summary of how we do this. We split the money produced at the campground between property tax relief and also capital campaign, or capital investment for the park, and then of course paying off the expenses of the park itself. We have some numbers in our packet that show the performance of the park for 2016. Dave's got 2017. We're going to talk that through. Historically, we've always budgeted pretty conservatively as for the performance of the park, and it's pretty much always overperformed what we've budgeted. So, with that said, take it away. Tell us what's up.
Well, thanks. I just had a chance to look at your packet today. I see I was to prepare a current version of our capital improvement plan,
Super.
which I'll pass along. And so this is something the park board looks at every year, typically in the late winter, early spring. Our March meeting was our last prioritization exercise of capital projects. We always remind the board why we do this. We want to make sure we have enough money investing in our improvements over the short term and the long term, and that the projects we're developing are the right ones. I gave you a snapshot of sort of a 7-year and 10-year look at what we've been up to with some rough pricing.
It's worth spending some time with this after the meeting rather than now. We're not going to dig into details on it.
Yeah.
But if you want to just kind of understand how this chart on the back works, because there is information on there that I think is relevant to tonight's discussion. If there's potentially $9 million of capital improvements in the next 20 years, we're talking about some simple numbers. If we don't have, the marina, 60 new sites, and a new office complex, it's $200,000 a year, which is actually pretty close to what we're currently budgeting. And so that would just imply that we would have to bump that up a little bit, maybe not this year, but over time in the next 20 years, so that maybe it'd be $200,000. Potentially need to be more than $200,000 per year. Mm-hmm. We don't know yet whether we're intending to self-fund some of these things. So I guess, first of all, we understand that we work through the state and through the federal government to fund some of these major projects, in particular break wall construction or major improvements like that. There's also the Greater Minnesota Regional designation that we're working on with the intent that we would have access to funding for some of the features that create the regional designation in the park. So I think what this says, or what you should see that it says, is we're in a really good place right now in terms of how we're funding the park. We might want to bump it a little bit over the next 5 years, just to make sure that we stay in a really good place. And we do intend to go out and ask for some assistance on some of the bigger items. This is the kind of information that Dave prepares for the park board and they get to look at. So it's just so you know that they're doing a pretty thorough job about their capital improvement planning right now.
Yeah.
Hey.
Any questions on the capital improvement plan? I think that it's great to have this written out in this kind of detail. The replacement year for some of these items seems strange when the life expectancy of 5 years on the pontoon boat, purchased in 2004, replacement year 2023. It's a long 5 years.
Yeah, that's why we're not getting into it tonight.
Right, exactly. But anyway.
And there's lots of variables. Like
There
you
are
just
variables,
said,
true.
how this will all play out, so.
It's just a planning document. Really, the intent is to give us those numbers at the bottom of the page so that we know how to budget. Because when we make our purchasing decisions, we're making those independently.
Right.
And just to clarify, the life expectancy is from like a 2018 date moving forward.
Okay, gotcha. That makes way more sense.
That's right.
So this is our first time through looking at this. We talked a little bit about it when we did the budget. This is just putting a little more information around a process that's really gone on every year anyway. And just to try to talk about what happens when we overperform and what does it allow us to do, and should we continue to operate that way, or should we change how we budget and do something differently. The 2016 year is obviously complete. We know exactly what happened financially. We did budget an amount in 2016 that we intended to use profits from the rec park marina operations to write down property taxes. And that happened. And we also made additional money that we budgeted to put into a capital improvement fund, and that happened. But we also made additional money above and beyond that. And what happens to that money? It just goes into the general fund. And the general fund balance is increased. And we spend that money. And so, for instance, we've spent some general fund balance on the public works facility, but we also spend it on smaller projects. And so whether or not we do any planning around as the council decides that they raise the level of priority on them. So the park capital project fund is $513,000. That happened kind of, we'll call that after the 2016 numbers. So we're not going to do the math where we take that additional money and put it in here. But when it comes to 2017, we will. And there's a chart that shows how that works. We're expecting, I think, about $37,000 of contribution in 2017. So what that means is we budgeted a certain amount of money to spend on capital projects. We spent quite a bit of it, but 37,000 of it that we said we were going to spend, we didn't, so that's going to be contributed to the balance. More money than we budgeted, then that would be taken out of the balance. So that's how that works. Do you see the capital improvement plan here? So it's not just $200,000 a year, it's also $500,000 that we already have a balance on that we use to fund these projects. So let's flip over to the table that's really hard to read in email, which is just this little skinny guy here when it flips sideways on you.
Table 1.
Budget versus actual. So what happened? In the rec park, we said in 2016 we were going to spend $630,000 on operations. We actually spent $636,000. We budgeted $900,000 in revenues. We actually received almost $50,000. So we expected to net $269,900 in profits, which we used to write down property taxes.
And that's the number that we budget off of, is that 269,907, because that's what we expected we would get.
Yep, and we actually got 413. So then we budgeted $137,000 to go into the capital, but we only spent 109. So what that, netting out 27, that would be a contribution. So what's the excess? The actual excess is not the 27. We take that out of the profit because we already put it in our capital budget.
Right.
So we take the difference between the 413 and the 270, and that's our outperformance. We subtract from that the amount that we were going to contribute into the capital, and we've got this $116,000 that we didn't plan for, but that we did receive. That's the rec park. Similarly, in the marina, we ended up with $20,000 excess. And then the city parks, we overspent by about $1,400. So we've got, in total, almost $136,000 in 2016 that was contributed to our general fund. When we do this for 2017, we'll add the golf course to it, which is going to make a pretty big difference because they're going to be a big money loser. And we do budget some of that loss. We bake that into the budget, but sometimes they lose more than we budgeted. And so that'll be put into the mix as well when we talk about it. But since this is just a thought exercise more than anything else, because this money's already been in our pockets and we've actually already spent some of it, we're just trying to figure out how to use this in our budgeting purposes.
It's a good illustration to show what's happened in the past so that we can better plan for the future.
So $136,000, how do we spend that? Well, we lost $16,000 more than we thought in golf. Of course, we spent $17,000 on tennis courts. That we gave $75,000 contribution to a housing project. We put $7,500 towards Sawtooth Bluff master planning, and we spent $25,000 on stormwater plan. Those things could come from council priorities line item. They could come from capital in some of our departments if we decided to. Like we could say the tennis court comes out of the $500,000 park capital fund if we wanted to. Or we could see that because we made this money and we built our fund balance, we were able to make the choices to do these things because we had the funds available to do them. What potential future uses are there for this money? Because that's 2016. We just did 2017. There's more. The park master plan update. This is just an idea here that potentially we could spend some money on doing an update of the master plan so that we can get our designation done and then apply for funds for some of those capital
I
projects.
thought that we were already planning on doing that.
Well,
over
we're
the
planning
winter?
on it, but we don't have a
We
budget
didn't
to
budget
hire
it.
some help to do it.
Gotcha.
And so now this is well, if
Starting
we
a
were going to hire some
conversation.
help, it's going to be money that we don't have baked into an operating budget. It's coming out of general fund reserves. This is where those reserves came from. Artist Point Boulder Park planning. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that later, but the Historical Society has kind of put on hold their plans that we had talked with them about because maybe it's a little more complicated with the number of players involved and it doesn't quite fit exactly what they were thinking, and so they want to just wait until some of these other processes are complete before they go ahead and do some planning, and we maybe need to step in and do some community visioning around that piece of property so that we can give some guidance to some of these other agencies that are looking at it, what the community is willing to participate in, what they'd like to see in terms of goals. We could add some of the profits into the capital fund. This is one way that if we outperform and we decide we want more, we want to go faster on that plan, we take these profits and we add them to the capital fund so that we can go faster on the capital improvement plan. There's some other options on the last page. And then here, just so we're looking at this rec park revenue budget chart, you've seen this before, but this one's updated for pretty good 2017 numbers at a little over 1.1 million, and our 2018 budget at 980,000. So, I mean, you can see we're clearly being extremely conservative at this point at 980,000.
So we could have numbers similar to what we have this year,
And we'd still
next
end
year,
up-
if,
We fully expect to outperform 2017 in 2018.
Right.
And if we look at our history, the worst we've done since 2007 is outperform by just a little tiny bit. So, and, maybe 2013-14 was flat or even went down just a tiniest little bit, but we've never gone down big time. And we've gone through recessions, we've gone through terrible weather seasons, we've gone through $5 diesel, we've gone through a lot of factors that would potentially say, that we should be concerned about in terms of risk factors, and yet the performance is not being affected by that. And if you look at the, maybe these past few years of economic recovery and people looking to travel in a different way, plus the park board's efforts to do targeted rate increases and really take advantage of the value in the places where it exists down there. And they've done that again for 2018. So
Right.
we think we're going to make more money next year, not less. So if we think that that's true, and even if we just did a straight line regression, it says we should put $1,075,000 in for 2018. How do we want to deal with that? It's 980 right now. I'll give you away one secret before we talk about these three choices. The proposed levy calculation as it sits today is just under 10% after we put the full amount of the health insurance increase in and do all the other minor changes that have occurred since then. We're not allowed to levy for that, and I don't think we want to anyway. And so that some of this is going to be used for property tax relief. But here's your three potential responses, and maybe there's more. But we can leave the revenue budget unchanged and change other things to get the levy down. I will recommend that. We could increase the rec park revenue budget and put that just towards levy reduction. So we pick the levy amount that we are willing to do, and we make the change in the rec park budget that affects that makes it happen. So 60,000 more, for instance, would get us down to just under a 3% increase.
So
That's $1,040,000 in revenues in 2018.
That's 2018, but
Yeah.
it doesn't speak to the 2016
Nope,
numbers.
or 2017 numbers.
Right.
But what we don't want to do is use the proceeds, the additional proceeds from 2017 to write down property taxes in 2018. Because now we're building in a structural
Right.
need
Yes.
for that.
I get
So it's effectively the same thing to say we're going to use 2018 revenues to lower the 2018
Because we're
property
dealing with
taxes.
current budget then.
Yeah.
Right. So at 60,000, like I said, we're at about $1,045,000, and that's at just under 3%. And now we're talking about a realistic, still conservative rec park number, and a pretty reasonable levy number, and eating all of these expense increases from the 29% health insurance that we saw.
Right.
So you're saying from 10 down to 3?
With 9.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
under
okay.
3.
Thank you. With the 60,000.
With the 60,000. So I think
Okay.
that at a minimum you can do that. Now, of course, 3 is arbitrary. Pick a different number if you want. If you think it should be 5, we can do that. If you think it should be 1, we can do that. And look at what those numbers, what change that would require. The third option is, well, what if we said, we think we're going to make $1,150,000 next year, and we put that in the budget, and we take those additional revenues, and rather than write down the whole property tax and put everything at risk that we don't get to $1,150,000, what if we put that money towards capital project budget, and then if we don't get it, it doesn't get contributed to the capital project fund? Or what if we put it towards council priorities, but if in July it's not looking like we're tracking right, then we adjust. But in some way, we try to be realistic with our revenue number, and we put that additional revenue on the expense side in a low-risk place that we can back off of, not a structural place, but a low-risk place.
So one of the dangers to that would be if we didn't meet our revenue estimates, we would then have to draw out of reserves to fund operations.
Well, we wouldn't
Not
build our
this point.
operations
Capital
up to
improvement.
spending all that revenue. We would have non-operating expenses like contribution to capital improvement projects,
Okay.
or project funds that go towards master plan development. And then as we do this, perform like we think we're going to, we continue to spend that money at the rate that we were planning on. And as we don't perform, then we slow down the rate that money's spent rather than take it out of some operating place.
Yeah, I get a little uncomfortable, because I've always liked the kind of the approach of being conservative with revenue projections, just because you don't know what might change. And even though we've had a good track record and revenues have steadily climbed, there's still no guarantee to that. And I think it's a potential problem just to continue to assume that line is going to continue to grow at the same rate. And, I mean, it's great that it does and that it has, but I think we just have to be fully aware that that's a kind of an aggressive approach to budgeting.
And you've always, the way you prefer it has always been my preference too, to be conservative, maybe more than necessary with those revenues.
Yeah, you might be more conservative than me.
Maybe, but the effect of that can be, well, one effect anyway is, and those of you that have actually been on the park board maybe know this, when it comes time to set rates, the impetus is difficult to get. Like, why are we doing this? Why we're thinking about our customers and what we're doing to them rather than thinking about our owners and what we could be doing for them. And if we built the budget without that conservative approach, and we actually show where we're going to spend those dollars in the budget, maybe that helps the park board understand the need, and maybe it helps kind of pressurize that conversation in a helpful way.
I would agree, yeah.
Well, I certainly had no problem letting them know that, gee, you must have increasing expenses. We had that conversation many times where I looked and said, come on, your health insurance must have gone up. Your other other costs to operating this must have gone up.
Yeah.
So I would think that shouldn't be that difficult of a conversation when you're thinking things through. But whatever, I get what you're saying.
What makes it difficult is how well it's performing.
Sure.
Like, well, we made a ton of money this year. Is it greedy to ask for more? And I just think that's the wrong way to think about
Well, that's
it.
because they also don't see itemized expenses as much.
Well,
And
I
they're not-
think
But
it
whatever.
goes back
It's
to
not
this too, is that
major.
just because you look at it in terms of 1 year. We have a long-term plan, and reinvestment in that park is really critical to carrying out that long-term
Right.
plan. And you don't reinvest unless you have the resources to do that, and it doesn't all come from that one pool.
I
And
think
we
the
hear-
park board is really strong on that point now. Like, you've built that capital improvement idea into them. That's why we made this change and created this fund, and they understand the need to reinvest and support that. The thing is, the park's not just about reinvesting in the park. The park is an asset for the entire community, and it generates revenue that the community can use for all of its priorities. So it's not just the list that Dave and the park board have looked at, but it's also the public works facility, city hall, property tax reduction. Primarily, that's what we've used it for.
So I have a question about the latter two potential responses that we have. So if we keep doing it like we have, you know, to write down property tax for 2018, we get it down to a 531. We know whatever percentage we all agree on. You know, even if we assume that we don't make a single dollar more than we made in 2017, if we put the $60,000 into property tax relief so that we can get the levy number down, you know, we're still overperforming by almost $40,000. Which, you know, then we have to figure out what we're doing with that sort of money. My question about the final, then this new concept of actually writing those numbers into the budget. Why haven't we done that in the past? I mean, like, what's the strategy? What's the benefit of a strategy like that, to, you know, versus just having that excess money be put into the general fund and then spending it out of the general fund?
If you look at the list of things, this potential use is already spent list. Put yourself back in the situation where you were asked for that money. It was then that they needed it. It wasn't a year from now, we're hoping you can build this into the budget so that we can do our project. And so it's this ability to be able to be a little more nimble in responding to opportunities that having a fund balance creates. That's why we have it. Now, we could still do this and just take that excess money and call it contribution to capital, or, you know, council opportunities fund.
Yes.
You know, something
Council
like that.
priorities, yeah.
And then it's not operating money, and if it doesn't get into the fund, we don't have it to spend. You know, we could still do some kind of, that's the kind of low risk. We'll put it in the budget,
Yeah.
but put it on a low risk item where if it doesn't show up, all it affects is how fast we do the things we were planning on doing.
But I think if you look historically too, you know, there really hasn't been the kind of growth that we've seen in the most recent years. I mean, there's been growth, but we've also done a lot of things that have, you know, I mean, we had those couple of years of pretty stagnant growth, and you know, you don't want to start to make major changes to how you're conducting your business when things are starting to slow down. Now we're seeing ourselves on a different kind of trend line, and I think that maybe this is the opportunity to take a look at something different. But you know, I mean, I've raised the question, you know, in the past, but I've always felt that we needed to be very conservative about, you know, those revenue projections, just because something could happen, and if you're counting on that money and it's not there, you got a problem. And when the money is there and you didn't count on it, well, it's a whole lot easier to deal with that. And, you know, we're in a good position because of that.
So let's say we write the actual estimate into the budget for 2018, and some of that money we put into council priorities, just because.
What is that dollar amount when you say the actual estimate?
Well, for 2016.
Like, what do we think we're going to make in 2018?
Yeah.
Well, Dave, what do you think we're going to make in 2018?
In 2016, we made 100.
1.4?
No.
Yeah, we
one
finished
point.
at 1.2 this year,
Okay.
and we did some very aggressive rate hikes on high-value sites, like 6 to 8% on some of our full every
Primo
night
ones.
sites.
I wouldn't say very, but aggressive.
Well, yeah, I mean,
You wouldn't say that.
I wouldn't say very either.
well,
If
it went from
minimal
what
is
was
3.
like a 1 to 2 marginal over the last 2 years, in 2016, 2017, 2% rate hikes. For 2018, we're looking at 6.5, 9.8 on a lakeside weekend site, almost $5 more per night on a high value site that's always occupied.
So are you saying 1.4 or 1.04?
1.4.
1.4.
So in
So that's
2016,
totally off.
No, you asked me that question, and I'd say
You need a bigger chart.
250 is what we're gonna make.
well, that's because you're following the actual
that's good. It's
regression
conservative.
line and being
No.
So you're
conservative.
saying the
No,
growth is
I think we'll
coming
make a
from
lot more
the
than the regression
targeted
line.
pricing?
Yeah, from
It's-
sites that people will definitely stay in. Even on a wet, cold, high gas recessionary year, the sites that are right down front of the harbor took about an average 8% rate hike for 2018.
And they were still
And like
occupied.
these, like 15 sites were like 25% of our market cap. We make 25% of our revenue from 15 sites. And those 15 sites got an 8% rate hike.
Yeah, so it's not like you're basing this on that many more people coming.
Nope.
It's basically back into pricing, which feels
Yeah.
more secure
Yeah.
than counting on, and at some point, you can only have so many people anyways,
Yeah.
and then you're
And the-
done.
And just anecdotal, demand and new people, new RVers entering the market, baby boomers retiring, RV sales, all of the indicators of our industry are very positive. And yeah, the popularity of camping and the North Shore and our product is very much in demand right now. It has been, we've seen that growth in the last couple of years on occupancy, composite occupancy going up 4 or 5% per year.
No, the 1.2, you're including all
The
of your
marina.
departments.
Just the campground and the marina.
Yeah. The 980 or 985 that's in the budget is just the rec park.
Yeah, so
And the
what-
revenues at just the rec park are about 1.1 something.
1.120.
Yeah.
Yeah, this year we cleared a 1,120,000 from the
Right.
campground.
So how much more are we going to get from the campground? I mean, we're not going to get another 200,000 next year, is what you're saying. I don't
I'd
think
like
that's
to
going
think so.
But
really-
I mean, even at the
I
park
believe
board,
it.
when you talked about what estimate you think these rate hikes are going to have, I mean, there's an easy 50 on the table. And if you look back at the growth, I mean, it's been more than that the past couple of years. So I could easily see another 100 that you get out of the rec park. The marina's growth is a lot slower.
But
And it's just kind of this, we make a nice little piece of money every year out of it. And then the golf course is, of course, going in a whole different direction, so.
And then that, I was just gonna say, so then what you're saying is, I mean, it's always been there, it's not like we haven't had that, but you're saying you wanna take it right there off the top when we figure out the total amount.
Well, we
Is
made
that-
another switch when we put the fund balance together for capital. We also made a different change. We took the golf course from an enterprise fund on its own, where we were making transfer payments from the general fund to this golf course fund, and instead we just make it a department,
In the
like any other department, like the streets department, which, by the way, spends a lot more money than it generates in revenue. So, the golf course is
Of
the
course.
same way. It's a service we're providing. It creates revenue, but not enough to pay for it. So then it will be just kind of built into that spreadsheet that says this is how much each department needs from property taxes that it doesn't generate on its own revenues.
Yeah. Okay.
So right now, we've got written into the 2018 budget, 985,000 for the rec park,
Yeah,
not for the
campground.
marina, for the campground.
yeah,
Yep. So, and we're saying that next year, we could potentially be seeing 1.2 coming from the campground.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a little bit over a $200,000 difference there. So I guess the question on the table then is, do we write that $200,000 into our 2018 budget, or do we assume, like we've done in the past, that conservatively assume that the amounts are going to be lower, and then that the actual revenues are going to be lower, so that we can have some flexibility with that extra money and not have it committed in case we don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I like that idea of having it go back to the park for reinvestment and maybe speeding up their capital program. But I also see some value in some of that money being available for other city priorities,
I agree.
which,
This building. I mean, this is
This-
one of
this-
our only real sources of significant revenue that we can spend on the debt that's gonna take to do this building.
Yeah.
So I do think there are other city priorities that could also benefit from this, and as an enterprise fund of the city, I mean, we're already using it to buy down the levy, and we're talking about lowering that levy to something 3% or, thereabouts, of, we can have that conversation, but if additional funding is also available to put into the park for reinvestment, capital, investment, I think that's great, because I think that, we need to be cognizant of the fact that that is an enterprise and it needs reinvestment, and the more activity that goes on down there, maybe the quicker some of those things need to be done rather than later. And then that there's also other city priorities that should be addressed, and I think that that's a means to help us do that. And I think it gets everybody a little bit. It gets the taxpayers relief, it gets the park reinvestment, and it also allows the council to invest in other opportunities that are priorities.
So if we budget for the actual expected revenues of the campground, that assumes that you're getting what you need for your capital improvement, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of the $200,000 a year, right? And that we're paying down all the operating expenses for the campground, that we're getting some property tax relief out of the situation, and then we're also putting extra money, all the extra money in that calculation would then go into the reserves and/or council priorities.
Well, and Mike's option says just into a capital project budget, doesn't specify whether that's parks or
Yeah,
other.
I wasn't saying parks because we already make a contribution there.
This
So
is
we can
added.
increase it if we
there.
want to.
Right, but that would be the council's decision. But
Yeah.
I do think, though, that if there's that much more revenue, that the park should be seeing some of that additional revenue, and even though we're already giving them, or including in our budget, capital for them to do projects, I think it would be in our best interest to even include more.
And I
Well,
think
it's
that
compounded. The
it might-
benefits are compounded.
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, because then it keeps increasing the value of
But
that.
I think we should be careful about that thought process. The product today, as it sits, is performing this way.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that if we invest $500,000, it's going to pay off.
That's a good point.
Right.
In its current condition, it's extremely popular, too popular, in fact, because we keep it full all the time.
Right.
I mean, so we haven't hit that price point yet where this product is too expensive and people aren't buying it anymore. So we definitely want to make sure that we have and we do have a healthy capital budget to keep it at least in as good a condition. And really, it's kind of crept up in condition, I think, since we've had Dave here every year. That's kind of the plan. I don't know that it's worth investing in making it really, really nice, because that's not what people are buying right now.
And also, if
But it's not
we-
necessary, go ahead.
We need to trust the park board to ask for what they need. So they've already given us a list for 20 years of the things that they want to do, and with the calculations of not including a couple of pretty epic projects that would make it be $300,000 a year, they can accomplish on this all the stuff that they've put out on this 20-year list with $200,000 a year. So I think we have to trust the park board too, to a certain extent, to say that they'll ask for stuff when they have new projects come up, and that the council can then respond to that in order to make sure that the product that we offer stays at a marketable rate, or a marketable condition.
Well, and we started out this whole conversation saying there's still a lot of unknowns of what other sources of funding may come along when we get serious about some of these. I mean, I get what you're saying, let's help them all because they do well and they do well by us. But in the same vein, I think that's the same look we need to look seriously at our liquor store, which is another great source of revenue. Plus, we have a couple of serious projects we've already identified, like finding a new home for City Hall.
Yeah.
And making sure we can do something well for our city with what's sitting right here. So since you have a plan, you're getting money set into it, you have action steps to take, you've really put a lot into this. Maybe you don't need as much time and energy by us as some other things that maybe haven't had the time and energy
Yeah.
exercised on.
You're
It's not
talking
even the
about-
money, but just the planning and the
But that's all money too, right? All the time and effort and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
resource.
That's resource.
But-
Taking those profits and reinvesting them in the liquor store is probably a better payoff than reinvesting them in the campground.
So, 'cause it
Although
needs-
one item I do think that would bear fruit is the park master plan, if getting that submitted
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
designated as a regional park and being eligible for legacy funding would certainly be a great asset.
I would agree.
Yes.
Definitely
And
agree.
I think that should be a priority to get completed.
Well, and this was pretty key for that, right? It was one of the big.
Oh, it's huge, yeah.
So we're going to need some help with that. I think we've realized that much at least. And 2017, plenty of money was created then. So I think that number that we put in there, maybe that's a realistic number. But Dave will come back with some, and Dave and I'll come back with some requests for assistance, I guess we'll call them, to get that master plan completed and ready to go so that we can get that designation done.
So does anybody have, for the 2018 budget, does anybody have any strong feelings about how we work with that? I'm starting to see that there are definite benefits to increasing the rec park budget to the actual estimate. Because then too, when we start doing council priorities, that gives us another check to stop and take a look at how the park's actually performing, to see if we actually have the money that we've budgeted to be doing the council priorities.
Do you want a motion to set that for putting that into the budget for 2018, or what do you need to make that happen?
I don't know that you have to take official action, but some sort of consensus of the council on how you'd like to see it in the budget. Keep in mind, your next meeting, we're going to do a truth and taxation hearing. We should have a pretty good idea of what we want that levy set at. And the rest of the budget, whether or not this goes in the budget one way or the other, the thing we have to know is how much is the levy going to be.
Well,
And then the rest of that, we can really change our minds in the middle of the year or 2 times next year, however we want to do it.
So here's a start point then. Let me suggest that we set the levy for a maximum 3% increase using the available funds, and also project the revenues from the park at $1,250,000, and any difference between those revenues and what is actual would
Go into a capital?
go into the capital fund, yeah.
Good or bad?
I'd second that.
Well, that's,
People like that idea?
Yep.
okay.
Okay.
So I don't
That's
think
what
that's
we'll
a
show.
formal motion, but I do think that sounds,
Okay.
that sounds like
Is
a
that a
good
yes
step
or-
forward.
Or you're still thinking?
No, he's not
I
necessarily.
never stop thinking.
I do have a point. So the 3% levy max, you only need 1.50.
Yep.
Where's the extra 200,000 going?
Capital Projects Fund.
I didn't really see a difference between the second one and the third one.
We're
So,
talking about
that's
what do we show people?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is planning now, so
Yep.
we're not deciding to spend the money, but we are talking about our intentions next year and 5 years from now.
We're making it clear that we actually are planning on using that money, that's being overproduced by the park board, and we're
Yeah.
designating it for specific projects.
And in particular, next week someone could come in here and ask, why are you raising the levy at all? Why aren't you reducing it 10%? And you could do that with these revenues, but that's in competition with some pretty significant projects that need to be done.
Why do we
And
have
so
reserves?
This is helping us tell that story to the public. Like, okay, this is some of this money has always been used for property tax relief, but we also need it for some pretty significant projects coming up. So put it in the budget for moving towards those projects, and then when we start to show those project budgets, and this money is a source of revenue that's going towards it, just, all the pieces will start coming together.
It shows how we're able to take on a $3.5 million public works facility project and not really have that impact the property tax levy. Because if we didn't put that extra money that we produce into that capital account, then we would have to levy for that additional funding for projects that we have to do.
Oh, it affected the levy.
Well, I know it affected the levy, but we're still talking about 3%.
How does
It
that
is reasonably, yeah, that's right. It
It's
did it in a
more-
way
it's
that was
reasonable.
smooth and reasonable
Yeah.
rather than big.
Big chunks. which seems like people don't like big chunks. I don't.
Who does?
How does it sit with you?
I like a challenge.
I thought you said 1.4.
Yes, that's what.
Well, he's gonna make
we're hoping
150
for
at the
that.
I thought we were all, I thought we
We're
were.
gonna start like a pool here now. Like, I'll put $5 in for 1.4. Dave said.
Well, I've sort of, certainly, I do my best regardless of the number, and the pressure would be on. There would be that realization of our grades and our efforts as like a concrete number that reflects that. I would appreciate that, I
Yeah.
think.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like it would reflect well on our growth.
And just from the conversations we've had at the park board and looking at the budget and rate increases, and I don't know if I've expressed this well enough before, but anything less than the rate of inflation increase or anything less than the levy increase, if the rates don't go up that much, it makes me just kind of like, that seems kind of backwards. Like how this should, like a camper coming and saying, 3% is too much, and we're talking 7% levy increase at the time. It's like, well, property taxes are going up 7%, and or the levy's going up 7%, and shouldn't the park rates go up at least that, if that's what it's, so it's just, but that's what I really liked about your plan with strategic rate increases. I think that addressed that really well. But having this kind of challenge, I think, really justifies, raising our minimum increases, which I think is.
That's right.
But that puts more pressure on you from all sides, so
Every camper comes in at 10
Right.
o'clock and they get a warm cookie.
We do have complimentary
But
coffee.
Dave gets heat from campers for rate increases, and the park board gets to hear a little bit about it, but not like the staff does. And
Do you think?
Dave
Do you
does,
think
but-
it'll change the feeling of the staff down at the park if they understand that this is kind of the instruction the city council has given them? Like, we're expecting you now to make 1.2.
It'll help us, like you say, justify increases and this need to be on top of things. Like there's been this kind of overperformance phenomenon that's like allowed for complacency or for the whisperings of why do we need more when we're already
Right.
$200,000 over what we budgeted.
Right. And it's always been like it's kind of been like a soft push from the council to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
But with this, it's I'd say
It's
a
an
firmer-
expectation.
Right.
That's-
Yes.
Well, and a lot of the other organizations that I've served on the financial committee for that, obviously don't have budgets this big. Some of them $500,000, some of them $1.5 million, like that sort of thing. But I've always objected to the fact that they're not budgeting for realistic numbers. Like, that's always been a problem because, you've got to assume that you know what you're going to do and what you're going to spend and how that's going to play into the operations of your organization. This concept of actually writing what we're expecting in there, even if the expectation is still conservative, seems like it's a move in the right direction for us to actually show the full impact of, in this situation, the campground on how the city operates. Because then we can communicate that more plainly to people who live in the city, and then they can understand the value, like the real true value of it, which might take care of some of that overperformance phenomena that you guys have been describing. So I feel like that's a pretty sound way of moving forward.
It makes us accountable for that additional money. Otherwise, that money just went into the general fund reserves, and it was there, but we didn't ever account for that. And now we are, at least in a fashion. So.
Right. So does anybody have anything else that they want to say about that? I feel like that's
How fortunate are we to have this conversation?
yeah, this is quite a conversation to have. Yeah.
Well, this will be an interesting year too, because like you said, that's real strategic, the way that, and you're really counting on that, and see how that plays out.
Yeah, there were lots of interesting adjustments at the park board level, just this month, where, for example, the cancellation policy on the deposit has become much more favorable for us.
Yeah.
Strict. We take the first night, it's always non-refundable.
Mm-hmm.
We used to have a $25 down and you'd get $18 back if you canceled.
Right, I'm glad you did that. I've actually, I heard complaints from people who are campground customers
I thought you
who
said
complain.
cancelers. Campground cancelers.
Also.
Well, some of them, yes, but I've heard complaints about people who have said that that policy is way too lenient,
Yeah.
you know, and so I'm glad that you guys took a look at that.
And so even just a little policy change like that has the potential to, I think, add a lot of revenue to the bottom line.
The details that Dave looks at always impress me. It's just, yeah, there's always something that's just like, wow, that's really good thought and really good focus and just doing a really good job.
Thank you. I run it like a business.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks, Dave.
any further
Appreciate it.
conversations
Yeah.
on that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, so you guys are gonna work on that, truth and taxations at the next meeting, so then we will take another look at it then. And, well, we'll take a look at it before then, but, on we go. So you guys got an email from Mike that had, a redone,
Yeah, so I didn't print any out. Should I go print some out for people?
Oh, no.
Okay.
look at that, we've got it.
Does anybody want?
This is the chapter one of the comp plan. So we sent some feedback back to the consultants, and they provided us with another draft. And I am interested in what you guys think about that.
Well,
So-
the health aspect, the community health aspect was much, it's just the Blandon format, so that was easier for me to relate to. And I know our community has had a number of cohorts, and so that should resonate with more people, I would think. So I really like that.
And I also, I mean, even though there are more things in that chart for the community health thing, I did think that it summed us, it just
I feel
seemed
like
like
it's
it was
better.
more like us. You know, more like our community rather than what the previous one was. It was easier to relate to the different elements. Were easier to identify the specific parts of the community. So I would agree with that. Does everybody have do you believe that should be a part of the plan and how it's shared?
It's fine.
It's fine.
I think that's kind of where I'm at on it too. I mean, I told them put Blandon's one in there because I think that's the one that people were thinking about when you're talking about missing pieces in the other one. I'm not sure how well it integrates yet. You can see the connecting to community health chunk where they have the little logos, so they're saying, well, this goal relates to these community
Things.
health features. That makes some sense to me, but I feel like we need to develop that more. And that might be something that we develop kind of outside of the creation of the comp plan rather than require the consultants to fully integrate it right now. But that's directly from the feedback that we gave them, so I'm glad they did that.
I wanted to look at this first. I thought we were not gonna number these because we didn't want a feeling of ranked. And now I see they're in a different order.
Each of us had a different order of them.
No, he's
No.
making stuff up.
Thank
That's
you.
brilliant, though. if we
Random.
could
That
pull
was
off.
good.
Random order.
Yeah.
Every single
Every printout.
Targeted
It's
marketing
gonna be
at its
different,
best.
randomized.
We each got our own.
We just randomized the chapters too while we're at it. So I mean, there certainly is value in having them numbered, but there also is value in not having them numbered. If we actually have these as priorities from 1 to 6, then we should have them numbered. Like if we're actually showing them as the strength that they appeared in the information. If they didn't, then maybe just bullet points.
I don't like. I thought about. I don't like the numbers. I thought about bullet points. That seems too vague. You could just have local business, housing, active living.
Infrastructure.
You know, just
Label.
hey, that's
Just
what I'm
label.
looking for. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I don't know does the job because then you can reference it.
Mhm.
Doesn't have a number. It doesn't rank. It's not ranked.
Okay.
That's simple enough feedback. I think they can do that for us.
Occasion, I guess. Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
look at
that's
lifelong
easy.
learning. Anyway.
I hate editing other people's work.
So looking, yeah, that is really something. So where we're at is we need to give them some pretty good we either need to tell them, yes, we're ready for you to do the rest of it, to put energy and time into the rest of it, or we need to send them some more feedback so that they can get their templates down better so they can do the rest of it. In the value 1 section, which would be on the, what is that, the 3rd page, 4th page, or whatever, it's the one with Visit Cook County on the front of it. Apart from just like basic layout things like the orange or the yellow box that's at the top, like I just realized that was there. I just don't, my eyes didn't go to it at all. But I like having the community voice is what we heard. I think that that's really good justification for what we're, for the reason why we put this together. The connecting to community health, I could take it or leave it, I guess. And I actually kind of do like what they put in there for the nuts and bolts, like about the data showing the peaks and valleys of employment, because that is something that's very real for us and something that we need to be aware of.
On the next page.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then the key considerations I thought were fair. It did seem a bit sparse to me, but I don't know exactly if that's what your guys' take on it was too.
That's what we asked for. So here's the feedback that they responded to by that creating it a little more sparse. Well, there's more data, first of all. So the charts and tables are in place of how can I help, if you remember that section.
Right, yes.
Go to a planning meeting, it's gone now.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, here's some more data about this issue. And then the other thing is, they removed the action plan style commentary. And so there was multiple people with feedback about, I don't think we were supposed to go to that level, or when we do that, it limits the response rather than allows for a broad response. And so they got rid of it. Now understand, there's already been some feedback that, hey, where's the what are we supposed to do part? But I think this looks a lot like what you were asking for, what I thought you were asking for at your last meeting. A little more data, a lot less, here's what we're going to do about it.
And I agree with Jay, it is more sparse, but I
Sparser?
like it.
Would you like it?
Yeah.
Well, you know, and I do like it too. The only thing I'm missing something, and I don't know what I'm missing here yet because I can't quite figure it out. But I mean, I like a lot of what's in here and how it's being presented. I'm a little uncertain about the one data chart and how that's supposed to be, how we're supposed to infer information from that. I mean, it's like that's not all the data, and
Yeah.
why that particular data.
I would have picked something different too.
Well, I mean, it just seems unusual to me, and I'm not sure how you use that data in a relevant way.
It also doesn't match what my understanding is. So it's with all data, you know, the way you organize it and present it tells a different story. So I'm not sure if that's the story that we're trying to tell with this
I mean,
chapter.
to me, it poses more questions than gives me information, and I mean, and I like the community voices part of it, but I'm wondering if it needs to take up that much room, and if there's something more that can be incorporated in that space that would.
So you said you're not sure, but I'll just ask anyway.
What kind of
What
elements?
what more?
Well,
Yeah, what kind of elements?
the something that I think is missing that I can't put my finger on.
Okay,
Oh, great. We'll just
Yeah.
tell them that.
curious.
Well,
They'll know. They'll know
They
what
must,
you
they
mean.
must know what it is because they've been talking about this
Well,
for
we
a
already
while.
had them take 4 or 5 things out, so they'll pick one of those.
Well, maybe, and I don't know what their thoughts are on trying to use data in other sections either of the plan. And just if this is an example of how they would use it, I'm not sure the relevance of it.
Well, this is to kind of process, the creation process part in my mind says, I don't think we should rely on them to pick the charts, because I don't know if they understand the issue the same way that we do. So maybe a better way, process-wise, is for them to say, here's 8 different ideas for charts. Which 2 do you want to see? And then have some committee, like our steering committee or the council, make a local selection for the data that we think would be more helpful or relevant.
Super.
That's smart.
I think that sounds great.
We had some conversation, I think, about saying some of like the details about all the process we went through to get this data would maybe be like its own document, so if we wanted it, they could have it. And wasn't there one other piece we said we could maybe have as a separate document that we could use later if we want? Maybe that was the zoning portion of it.
Yeah.
Would that be still part of this?
It's an appendix, I thought, is how they did
Well,
that.
That's usually
all
what
the
it
raw
says.
data that we collected will be available as a report. We definitely had a desire for more storytelling about how this data was collected and how these values were created. I think as we went from 78 pages to 15, that disappeared. So maybe that's one thing that we could talk about putting back in, was
But it
more
would-
storytelling about the data collection, about the engagement.
That's a good idea.
Well,
But
I
it would
think it's
just be its own
important.
thing, right?
No, I think it could be integrated. Like, I think that, well, that's feedback I'd given them too, is more about the engagement, more results from it, but maybe more just, here's what we did too. And so I think that it shouldn't be less space with bullet or quotes from people. It should be more, if anything, but maybe just different types of data or information that was collected.
I would think that, you know, when you look at the Grand Marais Visioning website, we have the online engagement results that they gave us, and these I'm looking at right now from there. They had these wonderful charts and graphs that showed, you know, like a big pie chart. What's the biggest challenge you have living in Grand Marais? You know, 34.3 people who responded to the survey who live in Cook County said it's the cost of living. You know, and 9.8% said not being able to shop for things I need. You know, that kind of a chart might be the thing that we can pop into those spots, so that we can then show directly what people are reporting, or what people reported.
Or even summarizing off of that.
Yeah.
And saying, you know, one bold kind of statement in space that says 34% said cost of living is due to housing, or whatever, you know, just the kind of the couple of key points that led us to this value.
Or did we say we didn't really like the history part, so they took it out? I don't remember.
We told them to summarize it.
We
so-
told them there was just far too much content and that no one was reading it, and so we had to do something.
So that's when they did the Grand Marais Today, tomorrow, and the planning section.
I think a 1 page of history would be real appropriate. I mean,
Yeah, I
there's a
didn't
big
that.
jump from 75 down to, you know,
And no history.
and no,
I think it's good. I mean, we're calling it a comprehensive plan because that's the terminology that's normally associated with this. But it just seems like a ridiculous concept to me that anything could be comprehensive. And by trying to be comprehensive, it becomes so watered down at everything, or
Right,
so
right.
dense that no one ever uses it, that what is it good for anymore?
well,
So if you want history, there's other places to go that are better sources.
okay.
This is more about the engagement we did and what
Sure.
it leads us to believe about
Yeah,
the values of
okay.
the community, and then what we're going to do.
Yeah. I'm comfortable with that.
The reason I brought it up is it seemed like that was an important part of what we
Part of our
determined from
vision.
all the
Mhm.
visioning was that people had
The
a
Right Today paragraph in the
Mhm.
one that they just gave us. It starts, you know, referring to our unique character,
and maybe that
and then
yeah,
that
some of
is
it.
all related back to the past,
Sure.
to the fishing village, to the family businesses that have been here for generations, to the rich heritage of native immigrant and frontier traditions.
Yeah,
You know, those
maybe.
sorts of things. So I mean, that alludes to the fact that those are the values that we're building this plan on, and that there is a richness in our community to be found in those areas. Yeah.
At this point, I'm
Yeah, I'm with you.
No, it's pretty. I think it's pretty great.
I think we're
Like,
getting closer, yeah. So maybe we tell them community voice is what we heard, instead of using so many specific comments. You could also use some of the graphs and stuff, and some of the stuff from the.
Wait, what'd you say?
Well, I think they've already
Sorry,
kind of done some of
responses.
it, so maybe what we're talking about is just more of it, or more about how it was created, maybe more storytelling opportunities about the actual engagement. But there's something else I would love, Tim, for you to get,
Well, you know, I thought a little
the
bit
what's
about,
missing idea.
well, a little bit about, you know, how will the council use this document to in decision-making process.
Yeah.
And I still I'm not sure how we blend that into this kind of activity that we conduct every other week.
Well, and I would dare say that the information that they gave us in the survey response, that 38 pages of survey response information that, was based on the questions that we wanted to find answers to in the community, that almost is better at telling us, which direction we should go in than a comprehensive plan would, because
Well, just as an
report's
example,
really strong
we
thing.
just set I think a strong policy direction in terms of how we're going to deal with park revenues in
Right.
terms of city levy, capital projects, and looking to the future. And have we looked at how this plan would be utilized to assist us in that process? I'm not sure how we blend that. And
One of the things I recommended or suggested as an idea to the consultants was, let's pause on putting together these chapters, and let's skip to what they wanted to do at the end, which is the how to make this a living document process. For me, that answers the question that you're asking. How does the council use this? Well, to be a living document, the council is using it.
Yes.
And so to create that strategy to make this useful into the future, to talk about the processes that you'll have, where you'll look at it, refer to it, what sorts of decisions will you use it for, how will you keep it relevant and updated. Maybe if we had that now, it would help us give them better feedback about what we want these chapters to look like. That was one idea that I put on the table. I'm not sure whether...
Can they integrate it into like Alexa, and then we can just...
Alexa, what does the comprehensive plan say about this topic?
Well, remember how much feedback we
Well,
had about that
David.
with the 78-page document was, this needs to be cross-indexed a million different ways and searchable, and we got to be able to summarize any keyword search topic. And one of the questions we thought was, maybe this isn't a document at all that we're trying to create here. Maybe it's just a database of responses that we can ask questions to. So, I mean, that's not really a silly comment. It's an idea.
I never make silly
Goes
comments.
back to
Good
what you're
point.
saying,
Yeah.
right? The answers are there, and then...
Well, and we just have to figure out how to access them so they're useful.
Yeah.
Well, and then, of course, the final part is the zoning piece that would take time and effort, and that was the one thing we needed to get out of this, and that to me is a big hunk that still needs to be done.
Do you think we could just have them create an AI that would
I don't.
actually,
With the money they have left.
with the money
So-
that they have left, create an AI that will go through
And the
all of the
enthusiasm.
information?
We either need to tell them, let's create the living document process and then pick this up again, or we move forward with the feedback that I've heard from you tonight, we create the document, we do the living process, and then it's ours, and we can change it as we see a need to.
I think
Well,
we need
and-
to get moving on it.
And I think the burden is going to be on us to figure out how we're going to use that
Yeah.
document in a way that's going to benefit, public policy.
I feel comfortable with the improvements that they've made since the first draft to tell them to keep moving on it, so that we can get it into our own hands, so that we can start figuring out how we're going to use it and how it's actually going to impact our policy. Do you guys agree with that, or do you want to see something else?
I agree.
All right.
So,
There you go.
can they have $11,000 more dollars?
Because that's what they want.
In all honesty, I feel some of this shows a lack of experience.
By the consultancy.
I think it's ours too, though.
Yeah,
We're
really-
trying to create something here that's different than what other cities did. And if you remember looking at all those other cities' comp plans and how we didn't find them very interesting or useful at all. So we are not able to then give them, here's exactly what we want, because we don't know. And there isn't a company out there that has created the document that we're looking for.
How much,
So-
what was the total that we'd pay?
Three that we'll be happy with. I just know that we're asking them now basically to sacrifice to do that. If we think that that's the fair thing because that's the contract we had, they'll live up to it. It'll certainly make
Boy.
for a better product if they're given the resources, and even if at 11, they're not gonna make money on this project.
Well, we also need to own the fact that this has taken us way longer than we said it was going to be, and
on our end.
and if this was a construction project, there would have been numerous change orders made
Yeah.
on this, which are usually outside the scope of the contract anyway.
Yeah, it's okay, and it's reasonable potentially to say, well, they had an onus to say something about this earlier,
Truth.
or,
Very true.
set some boundaries of their own.
Mhm.
I think that's reasonable, but I think it's much more towards the other side of the equation that.
Well, I am disappointed, though, that we didn't address the zoning issue that was identified and, could have been.
Well, we still will, and I think that.
If we give them the 11,000,
Yes.
that will be addressed in this.
It will, but not necessarily the. I don't know that we can describe the process we're going to use to do it, but they intend to come back and work on that with us as well. That I look at the amount of money that they put towards that, and it just seems pretty minuscule to me. So this is more about us using this document. This is like, okay, this is our first real case study of how are we going to use this document to take on an actual issue that we said we were going to take on, and they can just be there to help us with that. I don't think we really need them to do it for us.
It's not what Chris is kind of for, too.
Well, I don't think we need any help in writing zoning ordinances. I think that it's nice to have help. We just need to have some time set aside, and particularly dedicated to work through the planning commission process. And then we need to have some help learning how to use this document to make that decision about what should the zoning say.
Well, I don't know. I mean, to me, that's something where you'd want to go out and see what's the zoning in other, you'd be data gathering, and then you'd still need legal to know if it's cut and mustard,
Well, I don't
if the
think that-
wording's right.
I don't think he's saying we wouldn't do that, but I think that what he's saying is that also we need to make sure that we find the way so that the product that we're working on right now is instrumental in leading the process.
No, I get that. I'm just saying to finish the zoning seems like it would take a lot of other outside help to source work. And so what you're saying is with extra money, they're going to help us with that process?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's a horse in a different color.
I mean, I think the biggest
Remember that
part.
joke from The Wizard of Oz? No.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
I
that.
do.
I do.
Okay.
We do need to identify and have the community identify what they want in that district, and that's, I think, going to be the challenge, is that there's varying opinions, and there's lots of options available, and the question is, how do we narrow that down to something that we're going to create an ordinance around?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And we could get real deep in that right now, because there's lots of ideas that we could do that, but we don't have time, nor the.
Like
the
right
owners.
now?
Yeah. Not gonna, I mainly just wanted to say, let's not get into how that's going to look right now.
How about now?
Maybe we can do it after the truth and taxation.
So the question in the 11th, so the question.
They have to comment on the zoning first.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we learned a great deal about engaging with the community and doing this process, and I think that recreating that process probably won't be a terribly hard thing to do. We've learned enough from CDG that we can do some of the same exercises and have it produce some information for us. Right now, I think what we need to do is we need to figure out whether we're paying them $11,000 to continue and to finish the project the way that we really want them to do it, or if we want to hold them accountable to the contract that they signed, and how we want them to move forward. So what do you think?
Well, I think this has been a moving target, and that it's probably hard for a consultant to come in and give you numbers and then get expectations maybe changed or whatever in the middle of the process. So it's not unusual to have these things happen, but the biggest thing I would like to see is, if we're going to pay them that additional money, is that we complete that one zoning piece that I think is still really critical and needs to be done before we get too far down the line.
Right. Well, then we make the payment, contingent on the fact that on the product being delivered.
Is that a
Can we do
motion?
that?
Is that a motion?
We can. Yeah, make a motion. We'll talk more.
Okay, I'll make a motion to, for the payment of the $11,000 contingent on the delivery of the product as per contract.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any further
And
discussion?
clarifying that that is including the
The zoning.
zoning piece.
Yes, that is.
So the budget
really
that they
was in the
provided
contract.
us, the updated budget with that money included, showed a pretty small amount towards the zoning. So I think we'll be asking them to rebalance that a little bit.
Yes.
S- What that means is, we should really stop asking for a lot of changes on the other stuff.
I
And
think we.
minimal feedback,
Yep.
let's get that
Get it done,
document
get it
done,
done.
and spend as more of our resources on using it.
Yes, I think that's correct. What do you guys think?
I would agree.
I think we got, the essence is the values, and the essence is the data we gathered from people. We've got that.
Yeah.
All those other extra little things,
Flashy,
Style.
fancy things.
yeah, I don't really need.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I think, I still value that style. It's just, I don't think we need to dedicate any more resources towards it.
Yeah.
Right, okay, yeah, just, I want to be on the same page.
So that's the rebalancing of all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And is that, okay, so that said, is that a realistic number to get the thing we value at, not the most, but highly, is the zoning piece done? Is this realistic?
I think that this is what we're offering them. And I think that their contract was for the completion of the product, and that this is what they requested, this is what we're offering to them. If this motion passes, and thus that will guarantee the completion to the standard of the council.
I mean, we didn't specify how that zoning needed to be created. There was no process that said this is how many meetings and how many engagement tools and how many drafts. And just looking at this, can you imagine how long it could take to go through that process? You know, if we do that at the same speed that we're doing this, 11,000 is not enough on its own to even get a product going. So no, I don't think that I would call it a realistic number. If you're thinking, let's get a realistic number and talk about it before we do anything, we can do that. We could ask for, okay, let's get a real plan and budget to put that zoning language together, and then look at that number and then talk about it. The alternative is, like, if you pass this, what my strategy is going to be is to try and talk to them and target their resources in the places that will be most help to us. And you know, we could do this without them. It would just take us longer. So that having them here to help us will, maybe we'll have it in April instead of 2017 or 2019, you know, that it's...
And I don't mean to make a long discussion about this, but I'm just saying,
It's
like,
important.
in my head, the zoning piece is something that isn't a long community conversation anymore. We've had that. Now we just need to do it. It seems like there's a zillion other references and places, you know, other communities have zoning laws. The most interesting thing that, or not, but one of those, when I talked to those other communities about this whole issue the other year, and zoning came up a lot, and they mentioned a lot of things that aren't in our zoning, which seemed rather standard for them, and I got to thinking, wow, maybe there's a lot of really basic stuff we don't consider for whatever reason, but it doesn't seem like we need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to go out and see what's out there, see how it fits for us, apply this finding of how people feel and go forward. But we need someone to help us do this, get it written, stay organized, but I don't see it as another thing that we need to go out to the community and get a bunch of information.
Okay.
Oh,
Do you know what I mean?
I think that we will engage the community, just different types of questions. You know, we're not going to set up in the lobby of the co-op with a
Right.
sticker board about zoning. It's going to be different types of, much more specific questions. But I do think we want to try and engage the community at the same level at that, you know, to do the zoning. And we haven't in the past, you know. If we just want to do a zoning change, we'd have the planning commission study it. we'd have public hearings and invite people, but they wouldn't really come. And
Until
we'd
we-
write some language, yeah, unless it's about their
Until we
property.
produce a document, and then they show up and say, well, I don't like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but if we think about other, like, when we redid the zoning downtown and we started with visioning, when we got into the zoning language, we were still having public meetings, we did a survey of people that were living in the zone, so that we'll still try to do some of that engagement.
Well, then to me, that number is pretty
It's not realistic.
unrealistic.
Well, one of the things that I'm trying to get us to be able to do as an organization is handle these types of situations with our own staff on a much smaller and more frequent scale. So keep in mind, we're talking about adding another full-time staff person, and this is one of the things that that person will be helping with.
Well, not
is
even in the
data
engagement
collection.
part, just the whole
Yeah.
project
Yep.
part of it and getting it written up and the whole deal. That's all.
I see the $11,000 more as you know, finishing up the project as we identified it to them, and also providing leadership for the future. And when I look at it like that, I think that that's a somewhat reasonable number, assuming that original contract had that was for that anyway. I mean, if we were going to have them do the entire thing, like the entire engagement for the commercial industrial zone, then no, this is a pittance. This is not even close.
I think what we're asking them, though, is to bring their expertise and the resources they draw from that, that we don't have here.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and that's
Yes.
the value that we get from them.
We can lean on that.
Yeah,
Well,
so
sure we
like,
can.
That's useful,
what are
yes.
those common tools that we should be looking for?
Yeah.
What are a couple of city examples that we can look at and see if they fit?
Mhm.
They can do some legwork for us like that. How do we engage the community? Not do it for us, but just talk to us a little bit how we might do it, and then we would go out and do it. Those are the ways I think we kind of focus their resources to help
Yes.
us out.
And that was it Bill's specialty? Was that his name?
Well, now he's their zoning guy, right?
Right.
Yeah, but he's a different firm. They just kind of brought him in as a
Right.
partner.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
I'm not sure how he's going
Right.
to play into this.
They
We'll have to
might-
talk
okay.
a little bit more.
Yeah.
So we've got an active motion on the table. So is there any further discussion about the motion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Any other final comments about the community visioning? Otherwise, we'll wait for updates and continue to go with that. Great. Moving right along. One thing to bring up before we get to council and staff reports, there was a letter in your packet in reference to the office outpost. The Broadband Coalition folks and the folks that did the office outpost sent us a letter that basically said it's not performing the way they wanted it to. After December 31st, 2017, it'll revert back to city control. And they're more or less donating all the stuff that's in it to the city. So that's our idea, or that's something that we can look at that space and what we want to use that space for.
So in the meantime, we're using it. We're offering it to people that want public meeting space, in particular after hours public meeting space, because there's a way to access it. And
Right.
and also, if people are looking for space, we're kind of shopping it around. So if there's people out there, this is about 900 square feet, and there's no guarantees for the future. And if that fits with your needs, then come talk to us about
Yeah.
it.
We charge for public meeting space?
No.
There are no guarantees for the future is my slogan.
Sign up with at City Hall,
So,
right?
can you live in it?
You have a house. Although if you're willing to move back to town, yes.
I'm asking for a friend.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to council and staff reports. Mr. Mills, you're up.
Excuse me. Let's see here. I'm gonna let Tim cover the Parks and Trails Commission. Had a Y council meeting, and yeah, I guess just a large effort. A fun number is 1,700 members now, so that's
Unbelievable.
that's amazing. But otherwise, a significant amount of time was in brainstorming more recruits for the advisory council there. Just trying to get more people, diverse people, not the same players all the time.
Sounds familiar.
Is that, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there planning commission is it full yet?
Of course not.
You would know, because you would have voted for
Either
it.
is
Yeah.
EDA.
Oh, and EDA too.
I
Yep.
sure wish that the Y would do more to sell and let the message come out of all that is going on, just like the Youth Government Council initiative. It just so many things, not just necessarily selling, but just.
Well, I think, I mean,
Public
between the
relations.
radio and
Yes, thank
Facebook and, I mean, I don't know, it's hard to, I don't know.
Well, you
It's-
can do more. You're doing a good job right now.
Yeah.
Well,
you.
We're
It's
talking
great.
it up.
and I guess, I think maybe I mentioned this last time we had a council, a white advisory council meeting, but just sitting there and seeing the people go through the lobby and just, it's like,
All the families.
oh yeah,
that
oh yeah,
are
it's,
benefiting
someone
from
was eating
this.
dinner there, having a picnic, it was great, just all the activity. It's really invigorating just to sit there,
I'm so thrilled the kids have a place so close by to go right away from school to an activity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Safely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, but there's plenty of challenges too, and just messaging also, there's a lot of scrutiny from the county level outside. I mean, it's quite a resource, but if you live in Hovland, it's a lot harder to use that resource, but it's a great meeting place to kind of tie the family, because, it's Grand Marais is the hub, more or less, and so having that place after school is great, but, yeah, there's always that outreach too, so.
Cool. Anything else?
No, sir. Not till you guys go down and I'll remember something.
Perfect. Mr. Moody.
I've got nothing.
Tim?
Well, start with the Parks and Trails. We had a Parks and Trails meeting earlier in the week. We almost didn't have a quorum. In fact, we didn't have a quorum for our first hour of the meeting. The last meeting, we also didn't have a quorum, so it's kind of disconcerting that, we haven't been able to conduct business. And I'm not sure what that's all about. We asked the Parks and Trails Director to kind of poll the commission members to find out if it's meeting time or availability, change of heart. I mean, what's the reason that, people aren't showing up for meetings, and, do we need to start to rethink a different strategy or do something different? I mean, it's hard to say what the problem is, but it's obviously a problem that we can't get a quorum, because, can't conduct business if you don't have people there to do that. So we had a brief update on the Sawtooth Bluffs planning process that's opening up. Right now there's an interactive map online that's asking for user group participation to provide information about different ideas and interests before they open up to a public process. But up to this point, the discussions have been mostly conducted with the steering committee, and I don't know what you guys may have something to add to that. I don't know, but it seems like it's moving along. It's going to have to, the pace is going to have to probably quicken here soon, just because the timeline for completion of the project is I think still the end of February, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. The one thing that we did talk about is that when Dave resigns from the city council and moves outside of the city, his position with the city appointment to the Parks and Trails Commission will be vacant. He's moving into District 3, and I'm the representative from District 3. If there might be a possibility that we could switch our positions if the appointing bodies would
The
consider
city
that.
and county are game.
Yeah, and
Of course they would, right?
Jan, I don't think Jan's gonna.
I think Dave has said he would like to continue to serve, and I would like to continue to serve. So if that's possible, we need to get both sides to agree to that. And I think the county board would be making. Well, I'm not sure when you're going to be resigning, so that kind of is dependent on that, but
February 1st.
February 1st, okay, so along those timelines, that's.
Which meeting are you looking for?
Most unfriendly people I've ever met in my life.
Us?
And I've traveled the world. Seriously, as a railroader, I worked in 17 states. It's the first time to where next to the lake.
We're having a city council meeting here?
Yeah, this is a city council
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah. I walked into the tavern.
Yeah, but
Yeah, there's
We're having a meeting right
chicks
now, though.
and 4 guys said they're gonna beat my ass.
Okay. Well, why don't you have a seat? We're gonna be done. With
Yeah, the most where are we again?
We'll,
Minnesota Northern? Yes,
Yeah.
the most. I've been everywhere. I've been to Arizona, South
Okay.
Texas, Florida,
Okay.
Georgia.
Over here.
Dude, 4 guys said they're gonna beat my ass.
Over here. This is an open.
Yeah.
This is an open meeting, dude. So
Yeah, I was here
Have a seat.
one night in this whatever shit town this is.
okay.
And 4 guys said they're gonna beat my ass.
Yep. And none of us have. You can.
Yeah,
you
this
can have
is the
a.
worst place in America.
Great.
Yes.
All right. You can have a seat, and we can talk about
Yeah,
this
I'm
later, or
from
else you can.
Oklahoma, where everybody's friendly.
All
We
right.
give you food, beer, whatever. That's Oklahoma. This place, whatever. I went to whatever
Okay.
bar here.
I'm gonna have to ask you to leave. I mean, not anything like that.
I want to leave, and I can't wait to get out of here. Most unfriendly place I've ever been.
Okay.
17 states. And Duluth is kind of nice. They're greedy and like.
My apologies that was your experience.
Yeah, I went
Okay.
in and I got the southern accent. The old boy's like, "What's up with you?"
All right, we're gonna finish up our meeting. All right,
Yeah.
we can.
You guys are.
We'll meet up with you
Yeah,
later.
you guys will never make it in the future.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay. Tim, you were up,
We
right?
used to be a bar here, right?
I remember what I was going to say now.
Something jarred your
Well played.
memory.
It's something like that, yeah.
The Highway 61 project, we had a meeting last week and very constructive. CJ Fernandez took the geometric design of the plan and actually started to incorporate, three-dimensional, visuals of what that might look like. And I think it was the first time that I think we've all sat there and said, this is what we wanted a year ago.
It's starting to
This is
get
what
there.
we wanted to really help us hone in on that whole interface from business to business and the whole corridor. And it feels like it's starting to take a shape that's very positive. And, of course, we have the big challenge that there's still a lot of issues to deal with, namely the issues with the highway right-of-way and the interface with the businesses that are the butts, and some of them are more challenging than others. But, CJ presented options and alternatives on some of these situations, so we have an ability to go to those business owners and say, at least show them that we recognize that there's problems, or that the consultants have recognized that there's problems, and get their kind of reaction, understanding, and maybe observations of what the alternatives might be and what might work better for them. And I think that there was going to be an effort to start those communications here in the next week or
In December, anyway. Yeah.
it's very soon.
In the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if there's more you want to add to that, Mike, Jay, we're both there too.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's a good summary.
I mean, it's on a very positive, track right now, and I think that's good.
It's exciting to see what they're bringing forward. They got some innovative ideas as well.
Yep.
To increase some of the parking along 61. We're talking about back-in diagonal parking, which they've said that they've done in some other.
Reverse diagonal.
Yeah, so you pull up and then you back
Genius.
into it, and then you can just pull straight out. They say it's much safer and it works really well. in
Was
a
it
lot
my
of
campaign
other communities.
promises?
You ran on that?
Well, you better do that quick.
You're quitting, so.
Yeah.
The one thing that I
We're
did
gonna
want
wait
to
till
mention
you're
about this, though, that was brought up, is that they produced a map showing contaminated soils that was part of the project area. And it raised questions about all the wells that are out there that exist within the right-of-way or adjacent to the right-of-way. And this map that was produced by,
Well, by the MPCA, apparently MnDOT and the MPCA have been talking, and that there will be an MPCA project during the construction.
They're going to decontaminate a bunch of that soil in there, remove contaminated soils and stuff. And the plume for that area is enormous.
well, and
Like,
that just as a plume from over in the
Standard.
old cobblestone
Oh,
area.
Cobblestone Service Station.
And
Yeah.
areas over here or further down, I mean, do those kind of same maps exist? I mean,
They don't, of course. So this is the first we heard about it, which was really, I thought, the most important thing to take out of that meeting. We have no idea this is going on.
Yeah.
We've asked MnDOT to get us in touch with the MPCA project manager, and we're going to invite them to come to present to you what's going on.
yeah. Because, I mean, as recently as 2 weeks ago, I had a call from one of the environmental people that does well drilling and wanted to put some kind of monitoring well inside my Birch Park building. And I had talked to him a year ago and said no, and he called again. And I said, well, I remember you called before. I said, I told you no before. And I said, I haven't changed my mind. I said, I don't know the reason to continue putting wells in. And I said, especially a well inside of a building. I said, that seems, kind of ridiculous. But I said, there's a dozen wells within 100 feet of my building already. And I said, I can point them out to you. And he said, well, that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. I was supposed to get permission to drill another one. And I said, nothing's happening with this, as far as I know, in terms of any solutions. And the addition of more wells doesn't, to me, create a solution unless there is some reason for that to happen. And we've never heard that. And I, would certainly welcome MPCA coming before the council and explaining what the issue of contamination is in downtown, because they have samples from, I don't know.
Hundreds of probes and dozens of wells.
Yes, there are many, many, many wells, and
You can find that. You can find the map of those on the MPCA's website, and it's, the entire downtown is dotted
Yeah.
with all the wells. So anyway, so we'll get MPCA information on that, and we'll discuss that when time comes.
so, PUC met. We approved the rates for next year. That's gonna come to the council, right?
Nope.
Doesn't come to the council. We're done?
You already
Okay.
finished.
Well, the rate increases, actually were, for the electric fund, there was a 0% rate increase. We felt that was gonna be sufficient for our needs. Electric fund is in good shape. Sewer fund, 3%? Remember?
Something.
3%? Was that what it was?
I thought it was 0, 2, and 5.
Okay, well, I had 2, but then I thought it was 3.
2 for water and 5 for sewer.
Oh, I've got it even backwards then. So 5 for sewer and 2 for water.
Yeah, it wasn't.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, don't rely on my memory for that, so.
We need your memory, dude.
So, again, I think, PUC trying to do as well as we can to make sure that the funds have, the different departments have their adequate funds to have their reserves and maintain their facilities, recognizing that rate increases are always a challenge, but rate increases are also essential to continue to provide the service that we do, and we think we provide good service, so we think that this is what we have approved for this year.
Okay.
The 0% for electric, one of the issues that came up is that there's not a lot of crossover between electric, or they've contributed towards the same bond payment. And so when it comes to kind of balancing out expenses over and across those funds, it's hard to do between electric and other funds. And that you almost have to involve the general fund as an intermediary. And the way to do that, is through our franchise fee. We collect a franchise fee, that's our tool, Other places call it payment in lieu of taxes, but it's just a transfer payment from an electric fund to a city's general fund. Ours is pretty minuscule. It's, you know, around $60,000 a year on an almost $3 million budget. And one of the things that SIMPA just offered was some information on how bond ratings are done. They want the members to know how SIMPA's bond ratings are done, because the better job we do with our financials, the better rating that SIMPA gets. We are SIMPA. And one of the things that they look at is this amount of transfer payments individually in a city. And the number that these rating agencies, the threshold where they started to really pay attention was 5%. And we're not anywhere near 5% in a transfer payment. So an upcoming budget conversation someday might be increasing that transfer payment from the electric to the general fund.
Okay, and the last thing I just wanted to mention was, I was at a Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission meeting last week, and we made our recommendations for funding for 2019 fiscal year, and Lake County, their mountain bike trail system was included in that funding recommendation, I think to the tune of
649,000.
649,000. There you go.
Nice
So,
That was 695. It's a lot of money, whatever it was.
yeah, and they are looking to start work, possibly even with some of their trailhead construction next year, and likely to be looking at doing their trail work in 2019. So, pretty exciting.
Yep. Cool. Anything else?
That's it. Dave?
Tracy?
And Dave, back
I
to
need
you.
that guy to come back so I can remember again.
What do you got, Tracy?
Just waiting for you outside. Nothing.
He is
Um,
upstairs. I just saw him out there.
Okay. So, I have a couple things. We got a request to participate or to send a letter to the Coast Guard so that we can tell them that we're interested in helping them find a new home for their Coast Guard folks, so that we could start the process more formally of the Artist Point Coast Guard Station transfer stuff. I believe that it would be really frugal of us to send that letter to the Coast Guard. We know who to send it to. We have a template of it. So if it is the will of the council, I think that we should send that letter. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? All right, we don't need a motion for
Nope,
that. Just
we
do
got that.
All right, library board was Monday night, and there were some conversations about the budget, the adjusted budget, which includes the increase in the healthcare expenses, was approved by the county board on Tuesday, so that's finalized. That's good. Other than that, we looked through the strategic plan. It's been finalized from the process that the library did this last fall, and that's giving the library some pretty direct instructions for things to do to increase the reach of the library. Early December is when the 5-star library ratings are given out, and if we get the 5-star library rating this year, that will be our 10th year in a row of getting that designation, which is pretty rare on the national scale, actually. Like, that would put us into a different designation, which is kind of cool.
6 stars.
Yeah,
Is
then we
there
get
6?
6 stars.
Is there?
Not
That's
yet.
just for us.
Not
Yeah,
yet.
just
Our
for us.
stars go up to 11.
Yeah. Crank it to 11. Right now, there is a group in town from the Art Space organization. There will be a meeting, I believe it's actually tomorrow, isn't it?
Tomorrow
8:30 to
Tomorrow
10.
morning, where we're going to be, the elected officials are going to be meeting with them.
Say, how many of you are planning on going?
I'm going to be there. Oh, shoot.
That's the 3 of us, huh?
Did we not
4.
list that as a public meeting?
No,
Who's the 4th? Were you guys?
I can go as a business leader.
it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
I was just
You're all
kidding.
in.
I won't go.
So there's
I'll probably
there's the 3
forget.
of us.
No.
Three's too
Tracy's
many.
going.
I'm
We
going
only have a
to.
quorum.
Yeah.
I'm going to a lot of other things. So Tracy, if you really
I'm
want
also
to go,
going to a
you
lot of
can
other
go.
things. I am also important.
If you don't, then I'll go for it.
So the alternative is that this meeting is public, and you don't have to adjourn it
Right.
You can
Recess.
just recess until tomorrow, reconvene at Art Space, and then adjourn when you're done.
Are you free?
You can follow Dave home tonight and keep recording.
So that, I mean,
Follow
that's
the other
legal,
guy
but it's not
home.
particularly useful
Yeah.
for people that are looking for public notice in these meetings.
Well,
Right.
are there really going to be 3 of us there?
I'm gonna be there.
You're
I
gonna
was
be there?
planning on going there.
Okay.
I don't have to though, that's fine, whatever.
Who RSVP'd? Whoa.
When we all totally.
I mean, to
should've-
go.
We should have known that then.
I guess it was
Um,
earlier notes when you asked about these kind of.
I met
some
them
reason
this
I was
morning and
thinking
said,
you'd
yeah, I'll
already asked
come.
about this.
Yeah, not this one.
So Thursday.
I didn't know that you were all invited.
Oh,
Should have.
Mary.
It's not Mary's fault.
I was teasing.
If you guys want to go, I'm going to a meeting with them later.
Tonight.
Later Thursday. So if you guys want to go, I won't go.
Yeah, I know what you can do at 8:30 in the morning anyway.
We'll haul some more wood.
Also Mark Timber, yeah.
But that's
Anyway.
still 3, right?
Well,
Anton said he would
I'm
go.
fine,
So
that's
then
fine.
you two can go.
I won't add anything to the conversation.
You're
You
I
gonna
guys-
be
just wanted
sick.
to hear.
I know, I probably will not wake up tomorrow.
Well, then we have
That'd
to
be my
replace
luck,
2
and everyone's
counselors.
there's sick
Or you
as
may
well,
not
or
wake up
sick or
early.
something if we've
Stack
gone
the
through all
deck.
this.
That's all right. That you two are planning on going. You two are not planning on going.
Got it.
You already have plans. Perfect.
Super. Man, I'm glad I brought that up.
Dodged
me
a
That
bullet
could have been a
there.
mess.
I would
Do
have
I
to
have to
back
send out
away.
a note if I wake up sick or something?
Yes.
Then let me know and
Gil?
I'll come. Okay.
You could tell me and I'd go.
Or him.
You get to pick, I guess.
And then when you try, you won't get a hold of either of them.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going because I got a bunch of stuff.
Oh, boy.
So yesterday there was a meeting for the EOC Emergency Operations Committee, of which I fall into the person who makes the public information stuff for the city. So I was there. Mike was there as well, for as being an administrator and pretty much knowing where everything is that we have and all of our capabilities. We didn't actually go through any drills or anything like that, but it was a good thing to get everybody in the same room so that we knew who other people were in the case of an emergency. They probably will do an exercise sometime in the next year where they'll activate the EOC, and then we'll all have to go to the community center and actually do our jobs and act like we're dealing with an emergency. So that's something for later. Highway 61 we already talked about. I went to a downtown business coalition meeting, which is actually, they changed their name now. They're the Grand Marais Business Coalition because they want to have people who aren't downtown. Big group of people, really energized group of people. They're talking about the Higa Festival again for February. They're still working on how they can make the vendors and the downtown experience for Fisherman's Picnic better, in better partnership with the Lions Club, which is really cool. There's talk about a kite festival in the spring, which I think
Propane
is pretty cool. We haven't talked about that.
Not a bad spot though.
Yeah, there you go. So that's pretty cool. It's a great group of people. I'll keep you updated on what they talk about. December 5th and 6th, Tracy and I and Mike and Kim will be doing union negotiations for the city staff. Open people. I was arrested on Tuesday night for Youth in Government. We raised a whole bunch of money so those kids can go to their Youth in Government annual conference, which is kind of cool. It was a disturbing experience.
Handcuffs were involved.
Handcuffs were involved.
You know how much money was raised?
They raised like $3,000,
Good.
which was awesome.
1,500 was the goal.
Yeah. So now I think that they've got pretty much the entire thing paid for this year, and if they keep raising more money, then it'll just go toward the next year, which is pretty cool.
Party subs.
Also, one thing that I think that we should do before the end of the year is we should put together a joint meeting of all of the joint powers so that we can have a discussion.
By
So
the end of the year, think we can do it?
I think we No? Should we shoot for early
I think
January?
no, but, I mean, surprise me.
If you guys want, if we, do you
Well,
think
we have
could
like
do
2
it?
weeks, right? I mean, otherwise it's holidays.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah. I mean,
We tell them it's a holiday party.
Right.
joint powers holiday party.
Ugly sweater party.
Yeah,
There you
that'd be
go.
awesome. So do we want to try and do this in December, or should we wait till January? Just give me a sense of what you're looking for, and then we'll send some information out. to
There's
people.
no harm in trying.
For
There you
December? Okay,
I'm
Shoot
in
for the
favor. I'm gonna
stars.
try.
you might land on the
This is
moon,
So inspirational.
I favor a January meeting.
just because then we don't have to monkey with it until January.
Well,
Pretty much.
yeah, basically.
Okay, so if
That's
we're
a good reason.
two things, we'll shoot for it in January, because I think that otherwise we're gonna be pushing it too much, and we also have to think that
Middle.
we have like 5 other organizations we're trying to get there. So giving
I
them
think-
more advice,
I
more.
think 2 weeks is short.
And if it's in January, just pick a day and say it's then, and
Right.
then whoever shows.
Yeah,
You'll never coordinate.
right.
A
Okay,
doodle
so
poll
we'll
for
talk about that, trying to find a date,
20,
and then we'll
30
go from
people.
there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I have. Do you guys have anything? We are adjourned.
Hour late.
Thanks for the
Chris.
record. I think Grand Marais is a friend.